Good evening. I would like to call tonight's meeting of the Tacoma Park City Council to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Searcy.
Here.
Councilmember Landman.
Here.
Councilmember DeBala.
Present.
Councilmember Schlegel.
Here.
Councilmember Gilbert.
Here.
Councilmember Honzak.
Present.
Councilmember Wesselek.
Here.
Good evening, everyone. There has been just a slight reordering. I just want to make sure of tonight's agenda. Just want to confirm that the work sessions will be
They'll be flipped.
they'll be flipped. So we have we have two work sessions this evening. Currently, they're slated on the agenda as the revenue sources, commercial, railroad, and public utility taxes and vacant property tax or fees, followed by the authorizing the use of the State Revitalization Program, National Capital Strategic Economic Development or NED Grant Award to preserve affordable housing at 7520 Maple Ave. Those will be reversed. So I'm just going to go through the agenda for this evening. We'll have two proclamations. The first is a proclamation recognizing Lee Jordan Day. The second is a proclamation recognizing Invasive Species Awareness Week. We will also have our legislative update, followed by public comments on voting items, general public comments, council comments, city manager comments, and then we have a presentation. And these will be presentations from our business league, Long Branch Business League, the Tacoma Langley Crossroads Development Authority, and Old Tacoma Business Association. We then have a voting session, which is the consent agenda, which consists of resolutions providing for appointments to committees. And then, as I just mentioned, we're reversing the order of the work sessions, with the first being authorizing the use of the State Revitalization Program, National Capital Strategic Economic Development or NED Grant Award to preserve affordable housing at 7520 Maple Ave, and then revenue sources, commercial, railroad, and public utility taxes and vacant property tax or fees. On Wednesday, February the 26th, the council will meet at its regular time. We'll have a legislative update, a presentation from from the Department of Housing and Community Affairs, DCHA, on their rental inspection program. We will also have voting sessions. First is a single reading ordinance approving the DHCA rental inspection contract, and then a single reading ordinance authorizing the use of the State Revitalization Program, National Capital Strategic Economic Development, or NED Grant Award, to preserve affordable housing at 7520 Maple Avenue. We will then have a work session on council priorities. On Wednesday, March the 5th, the City Council will meet at its regular time of 7:30. We'll have a legislative update. There are no presentations that evening. We have a voting session on council priorities, and then we will have three work sessions. The first is budget amendment number 3. The second is library construction project update. And the last is a process for restricting parking at properties with limited frontage. And just as a reminder for council, that's the item involving parking in front of, or restricting parking in front of the walk-ups for residents, that their entrances to their properties is blocked by, goes all the way down to the street. On Thursday, March the 6th through Friday, March the 7th, is the Maryland Mayors Association Conference. And I will be attending and will be in Annapolis. On Monday, March the 10th to Wednesday, March the 12th, is the National League of Cities Congressional City Conference. I believe Councilmember DeBala will be attending that. And then that takes us to mid-March. So with that, I'm going to move to our proclamations for the evening. The first is in honor of Lee Jordan Day in Tacoma Park. My phone is not going to bring it. Perfect. All right. Lee Jordan Day in Tacoma Park. Whereas, as we celebrate Black History Month, we take note of the life and accomplishments of Lee Jordan, one of the most influential residents in Tacoma Park history. And whereas through his work with youth, including the formation of the first integrated sports program in Montgomery County, Lee Jordan was a mentor, role model, and inspiration across racial lines, leaving an indelible mark on generations of Tacoma Park children, both Black and white. And whereas, as a leader and advocate on behalf of Tacoma Park's African American residents, he played an important role in forging of a resilient Black community in the face of racial discrimination and economic challenges during the period of segregation and the decades that followed. And whereas, while a custodian at all white Blair High School from 1935 to 1946, and then at Tacoma Junior High until 1973, Lee Jordan, affectionately known as Mr. Lee, ignored racial distinctions and as a volunteer began coaching white boys to play sports, and in the meantime organized teams of boys from the Black community across Tacoma Park. And whereas Lee Jordan deliberately and successfully overcame racial divisions by integrating Black and white players on the same sports teams, and in 1953 also welcomed girls onto previously all boys teams as part of the pioneering Boys and Girls Club he founded. And whereas students under Mr. Jordan's guidance gained confidence, improved their skills, and learned leadership to the point that one of them, Sonny Jackson, enjoyed a long baseball career in the major leagues. Others, such as Morgan Wooten, the legendary coach at DeMatha High School, followed in his footsteps or became school principals, and Tony Duvall became Tacoma Park Police Chief. And whereas Lee Jordan's work to break down racial barriers was recognized as a primary influence in the peaceful integration of Tacoma Park schools after the Supreme Court ruling, and many of his players went on to fill the baseball, basketball, and football rosters at the newly integrated Blair High School in subsequent years. And whereas Mr. Jordan advocated on behalf of the Black community for city amenities such as streetlights and paved roads, and led successful campaigns for the playground where Black children could play ball and families could gather, and for the construction of the Hefner Recreation Center, which became a gathering place for African Americans in Tacoma Park and nearby communities. And whereas, in recognition of Mr. Jordan's life's work, the new athletic field at Tacoma Park Middle School was named in his honor in 1981, and he was posthumously inducted into Montgomery County Human Rights Hall of Fame in 2006. And whereas in 1983, the city of Tacoma Park proclaimed February 23rd as Lee Jordan Day to mark his accomplishments. Now therefore I, Talisha Searcy, Mayor of the City of Tacoma Park, do hereby proclaim February the 23rd as a day to be honored each year as Lee Jordan Day. And the next proclamation this evening is a proclamation recognizing Invasive Species Awareness Week, which is February the 24th through February the 28th, 2025. Whereas invasive aquatic, riparian, and terrestrial species influence the productivity, value, and management of a broad range of land and water resources in our community and nationwide. And whereas the annual cost nationwide to prevent, monitor, and control invasive species, combined with the damage to crops, fisheries, forests, and other resources, are over $100 billion. And whereas invasive species threaten the survival of native plants and animals, interfere with ecosystem functions by changing natural processes, and are a significant threat to almost half of all native species currently listed as federally endangered. And whereas invasive species impede industry and in energy production, threaten agriculture, obstruct outdoor recreation, endanger human health, and are becoming increasingly harder to control. And whereas native trees in our community serve an important role in mitigating climate change, provide protective and heat-reducing shade, reduce stormwater runoff, provide wildlife habitat, and improve human health and well-being. And whereas invasive vines threaten the health of trees and can alter an ecosystem on a fundamental level, and our rapidly changing climate is contributing to increased spread of invasive vines and other plants. And whereas the city of Tacoma Park recognizes the significant impact of invasive plant species locally and is actively managing cultivated and natural landscape sites to improve ecosystem quality. And whereas the city, as an associate partner of the National Capital Partnership for Regional Invasive Species Management, NatCap PRISM, and strives to continue incorporating invasive plant species management in its vegetation maintenance activities. Now, therefore, I, Talisha Searcy, Mayor of the City of Tacoma Park, do hereby proclaim February the 24th through February the 28th as Invasive Species Awareness Week, and hereby encourage residents to promote knowledge and understanding of the threats posed by invasive species. Great. And so now we're going to move to our legislative update. Hello, we are joined by Ann Seacott, who is our lobbyist in Annapolis and has been hard at work on behalf of the city, pushing a lot of our legislative actions forward. So with that, Ann, I'll turn things over to you for an update.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. So this week, we're almost at the halfway point during session. We're probably within a couple of weeks of real serious budget decisions getting made. And the budget picture, I have to say, is getting worse. There've been some reports in the news about legislators now pretty openly talking about their concerns related to the impact on Maryland's budget from actions taking place at the federal level. We're probably not going to be avoiding some pretty meaningful cuts in the budget, at least eventually. So that outlook is not very good, just FYI. Nothing specific to report at this point, just keeping an eye out for some of the more egregious cuts that may take place. On the policy front, we're weighing in on a couple of public safety, pedestrian safety bills this week related to stop sign cameras and the ability to reduce speed limits on the roads. The really good news is the unlawful restrictive covenants bill is passing the Senate. It should pass the full Senate tomorrow. That's a good thing. And then we're also going to be weighing in on a bill around ranked choice voting for the county. And that's all that is right now.
Awesome. Do we have, I do want to make sure that we give a special shout out to the working group on legislative items. I know that there's been there's been a lot of work. There's been a lot of work that has been happening. And the constant flow of things. So Council Member Landman, Council Member Westlake, and Council Member DeBala, thank you all for all of your work in reviewing the bills and getting things submitted in a timely way. So thank you all for that. Any questions? Councilmember Landman.
Just a quick procedural one. Did the stop sign red light cameras legislation testimony make it in by 6 o'clock?
I'm not hearing.
Oh, the question was whether or not the stop sign testimony went in. It did.
Yes.
It did. And thank you to our deputy chief who will be testifying, is that correct, on Friday on that one in Annapolis. Okay. Any other questions? Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Ann. And I know that we'll be in touch tomorrow because there's a couple of items that we're going to weigh in on tomorrow. So thank you for your continued support and working on our behalf in Annapolis. Councilmember DeBala, did you have a question?
I had a question about the hearing on rent On,
Just Cause.
Just Cause?
There's a question regarding Just Cause and how the hearing went on that.
So both the House and Senate hearings were yesterday. I haven't watched the entirety of both, but advocates did their good job on things and the opponents did their job on things. And, we are expecting the bill to pass the House again, but it's been made very clear that movement needs to happen in the Senate first this year, since the House already passed it last year. So we're working diligently with Chair Will Smith and other members of the committee to make sure we've got any amendments that certainly don't weaken the bill and get that through in a timely manner. So we continue to work, and if folks want to weigh in with the chair, reiterate support, that'd be great.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And I did have an opportunity to be in Annapolis on Monday at District 20 night, and Senator Smith did reinforce his commitment to moving a good cause forward. And there was a lot of people and a lot of advocates. So I think that the question is not whether or not he's committed to moving it forward. I think the question is how and what may need to be, what amendments may happen over the course of getting it out the Senate. That is up for debate. But he has publicly announced that his intention is to get it out of the Senate.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ann? All right, wonderful. Well, thank you again, Ann, and we will be in touch over the course of the week.
Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you, you too. Okay, now we're going to move to public comments on voting items. And just as a reminder for the audience, the only voting item we have tonight is resolutions providing for appointments to committees. Do we have any public comments on committee appointments? All right. Do we have any virtual public comments on voting items? Excellent. Okay, we are going to move to general public comments. Do we have any general public comments this evening? General public comments. Come on down. You're gonna have to hit, can you hit the button there just to make sure that your mic is on?
Am I on? 1, 2, 3.
I think I hear you. I'm just checking with our tech folks.
Do we have it? Hello, 1, 2, 3.
Nope, it's not on. Can we make sure that the mic,
Yeah.
okay, is it on?
Yeah, I feel like it's
There we go.
live.
That's better.
Okay,
Now
we
it's-
can hear you now. Excellent, thank you so much.
Okay. Richard Masterson, Ward 5. I've been in the city for 10 years, coming on 11. I'm concerned about public safety on the road. As a driver, I do a lot of driving grandson around and so on, to appointments and all this. And everyone is concerned about safety and convenience on the roads for their vehicles and their pedestrians. I want to address 2 issues on road design and how it relates to safety. These are a small item in your daily challenges as councilpersons, and that's for my age. I was a younger generation, but anyway, traffic intersections are the riskiest part of a road path. There are more moving traffic collisions at intersections than between intersections. With the weight and velocity of a car, a pedestrian or bicycle stands to lose the most in a collision. Intersections for vehicles of any type must make space for the apparent shape change of vehicles when they are in a turn. For example, when a bicycle turns a corner, the front wheel aims the desired path and the rear wheel drags behind, which increases the width of the pavement needed. The common inside curb radius is less than 5 feet. I I've seen most of them are about 3 feet. You come up, there's a power pole, and the curb just goes around it. And here we have 2 lanes at least this way, and 2 lanes at least this way. So the vehicle's trying to leave an 11-foot lane and get into an 11-foot lane. But the front end's going to overhang, and the rear wheels are going to drag behind. This is an aggravation to the car driver and life-threatening experience for a pedestrian or bicycle waiting on the corner. The vehicle will appear to calm down because the conscious driver will slow down to avoid striking a person and to protect their right rear wheel. The path of a turning car will require 11 feet of pavement during its turn. If it's the only car on the road, it can use 3 feet of the cross-traffic lane going through the intersection and coming back is what you end up doing, unless the pavement is provided on the inside of the turn. Or the rear wheel will be drug over the corner and anybody standing there. What I want you to do about this, I'll say at the end. The second issue of the two is the curb profile. The prominent edge of a square concrete curb rising from the paved surface may satisfy a traffic engineer, but the people using the path will experience it as a threat to passage. People on a sidewalk, on a ramp down to a bumpy warning strip at a street crossing may not expect a 6-inch vertical concrete barrier in their path. A pedestrian tripping on a square curb faces a broken ankle only for an edging that's simply separating the walkway from a lawn. A car striking a square curb faces tire damage, wheel damage, the steel wheel can even be bent, and loss of control. I would like these things to be in your considerations of plans for construction in our city. And I'm addressing you at this level because I wanted to get it into authorities. And you are the hub. You hire the people that do the designs. You issue the money that does all that. And I want you to be aware to look for details like this to make clear passage and safe passage for our citizens through our town. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other general public comments this evening?
Good evening, everybody. My name is David Reed. I live in Ward 2. Following the city manager's budget presentation on December 12th, a number of us felt the need to understand both the manager's draft budget and the city's budgeting process more clearly. So we created a small group called a Community Budget Working Group. We have no formal structure, dues, or even, for that matter, any formal leadership. But we all are committed to understanding why our city's taxes are so high and what, if anything, can be done to change that. So now we look forward to sharing the working group's understandings and recommendations with city residents. And we want to make sure that the mayor, city manager, members of the city council, and city employees feel free to join us on March 2nd for a budget public forum. We'll be meeting at the Piney Branch Elementary School from 2 to 3:30. And so it is on behalf of the working group and several other co-sponsoring community organizations, we warmly welcome your participation and that we hope that you will join the rich discussion that will surely follow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other general public comment?
Good evening. I'm here today to talk about the 7520 Maple Avenue loan that's under approval review. My name is Hussein Ibrahim. I live at 7520 Maple Avenue. I grew up there. I've lived there for 25 years. And I am on the board of the Duville Tenant Association, and I'm here today to urge the approval of that loan to our development partner, Orlo. This loan will greatly help Orlo in purchasing the building by our deadline of March 6th. And before I get into why this loan is so important to us and the positive impacts that it'll have on the residents of the community, I just want to make sure everyone understands the background and how we got to this situation. So last year, in January of 2024, we received a notice that the building was going to be sold to someone else. And under Tacoma Park law, Chapter 6-332, tenant opportunity to purchase, we had the opportunity to organize, which we did. And then we sought out other development partners of our choosing who had the best interests of the residents in mind. So we went through that whole process, went through months of interviewing and due diligence. We selected an initial partner. And as of February 10th, last Monday, they gave us notice that they would no longer be able to complete the purchase of the building. So I and the board scrambled to find other development partners with less than 1 month left till closing, the closing deadline. And we were able to find Orlo, who stepped in and agreed to be that development partner with us. And we now have a final development agreement with them that promises affordability, annual resident services, substantial renovations to a building that has not been renovated since it was built in 1960, along with many other benefits to the community. Given Orlo's tight time frame, I think that it is critical that they get all the help that they can get to help preserve the affordability, improve the living quality for the residents of the community. And I just want to highlight that we did try to negotiate with the initial purchaser, and he would not agree to any of those terms. So he did not promise affordability. He did not promise substantial renovation or anything like that. So I just urge the city to approve this loan so that they're able to complete this purchase for the benefit of the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Do we have any other general public comments? Do we have any?
We think we have Mary Jane Machuli online.
Okay. Virtual public comments, Mary Jane, are you there?
It looks like we can't
Looks
get
like-
it.
It's, the audios were way
Okay, we
off
can hear you
tonight.
now, Mary
Like,
Jane.
On my iPad was a lot, when people were talking, they were way ahead of the ones on TV.
Okay. But we can hear
And
you
it was-
now.
It was very difficult for me to understand. But anyways, thank you. Good evening. It was good to see Mayor Searcy at the 20th District night. And it was, thank you for Lord Charkutian for paying for a bus to send a few of us there. And unfortunately, no one seemed to be interested in parents with special needs adults again, but I'll keep trying. And while I go to other things that affect me as I'm one of the few lower income homeowners, I think, in Tacoma Park. And I've got a 2-bedroom house and there aren't too many of them left. And I'd like to turn it again into a place for people with disabilities. But no one has helped me. People have said they might help me, they will help me, but they never did. And it hurts. It really hurts. It's been 10 years since I've been begging. And I'm sorry, but I'm going to keep begging, I guess, as long as I'm alive. And I'm also, I got a ride yesterday from Village of Tacoma Park Rides from 2 very nice people. But they drove very kindly over the speed humps, but it hurts. I have osteoporosis, and going over those speed humps, even slowly, really hurts, and it may lead to worse for me and other people in the same situation. We have 5 speed humps on 3 blocks in my house on Boyd Avenue. I have no idea why. But I do believe we should have speed humps in front of daycare centers, elementary schools, and disabled senior buildings. And I just don't see speed humps in front of them that much, which makes me wonder where are the priorities. And I'm just thinking, just really, you know, for my health. I'm sorry, and other people's health. And do you know if Eric's bill has been approved? There was a lady on the bus with her son who, there is a bill trying to get people with disabilities that are not visible, readily visible, to have it on their driver's license in case they're pulled over, I guess, to see. Maybe that's might be the reason there might be a little bit off. But she was a very nice lady, and her son is Eric, and it's named Eric's Bill. And they were there, and they were on the bus with me. But I think they live in Silver Spring. But anyways, thank you, everybody. And I wonder if I should thank, I forgot to thank Cindy last time for coming to our Parents with Special Needs Adults meeting earlier this month. I'm sorry I didn't say thank you. Good night.
Good night. Thank you very much, Ms. Machui.
Okay, do we have any other general public comments? Okay,
All right, wonderful. We're going to move to council comments. Do we have any council comments this evening? Councilmember Wessellick.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Searcy. I'm glad I got out front so I can be the first to share my appreciation for the play day this past weekend. My wife and I and our 2 kids were there, and we had a very, very good time. We were talking afterwards and trying to decide what our favorite things were, activities, and there were too many to pick just one. It was a really good time. So thank you so much to the organizers of that and everyone who participated. It was a really good time. I want to give a special thanks to Director of Public Works, Darrell Braithwaite. We had a really good meeting yesterday, and I got to ask her every little tiny question I had about any traffic calming we've ever talked about or thought about in New Hampshire Gardens, and it was very helpful for me. So I really appreciate her taking the time to go over stuff with me. And I'm looking forward to working with her and the other city staff, as well as the residents, to see how we can improve things in that neighborhood. And lastly, and I had intended to try to come up with something eloquent to say, and I did not. But I just want to highlight that, especially in Ward 6, there was a period of time recently in this last week where there's just been a lot going on. There was a power line down, so a lot of folks didn't have power, didn't have internet. There was a house fire. When I was coming home the other night, I saw a major collision on Sligo Creek and New Hampshire Avenue. And I just feel like everyone's kind of on edge. And that's on top of many of the other things that a lot of us are on edge about. So I'm just saying that I'm just trying to just say it's being seen, you know, we're all going through a lot right now. And so our local community is kind of all we can try to help right now. So I'm just lifting up the ways that we're helping one another. Connected to that, though not necessarily, is that I'm going to plan to have an online Q&A with me. I blocked off Tuesday, March 4th. I will share details on that with residents, but I just wanted to flag that right now, that it'll be coming up soon, and I'll be able to talk about what's been going on and field any questions and comments folks have. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Westlake. Councilmember Landman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I would like to say that Play Day was very well timed for all the reasons that you just talked about, Councilmember Westlake. We all really needed some fun. I'm showing off the friendship bracelet I made at Play Day. It says, I heart Tacoma Park Ward 1, and it's pretty artistic if I say so myself. I'd also like to point out that Councilmember Westlake and I are both very bad at following rules, and we lost out at Simon Says very early in the afternoon to some much more attentive teenagers, so shame on us. My main point I'd like to make today is that I will be having a council member coffee on March 1st. It will be from 10 to 11:30 in the Nunley Student Center at Montgomery College in Ward 1. An opportunity for residents to see the Student Center coffee shop and get to know the college a little better while we have a chance to talk about what's on everyone's mind. And I heard from a lot of residents over the last week who have their economic situation and their job situations on their mind. It's sweeping through our city, and the anxiety levels are very high. So everybody hang in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Landman. Councilmember Gilbert.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess in keeping with the theme of fun and positivity, I wanted to give a shout out to the Recreation Department for the phenomenal job that they're doing with their winter sports basketball program. John Webster, who's the coordinator with the Recreation Department, has done a great job in organizing the coaches. Has gotten some great coaches who do a great job with the kids. I can only speak for the program that I'm working under. I have a group of sixth graders that I coach on Thursday nights and on Saturday mornings, and to see the joy in their faces and the commitment to their teammates and the passion for the sport and learning and team concept, it's just great to see. And in the background with all the negativity that we have, it's an awesome to see. And if you have time on a Saturday morning, come out and watch them. The group that I coach and the other sixth graders play Saturday mornings at Pawnee Branch. I know the Recreation Department has other grades and they have the girls play at other locations, but it's just awesome to see the Recreation Department do great things with the kids, and it's good to see the joy in the kids' faces. Also, in light of the proclamation for Lee Jordan, I would be remiss if I didn't speak on the great impact that he had on my life as well. Mr. Lee Jordan, I think some people have heard me say before, bought me my first pair of football cleats when I was 7 years old. So he was a very impactful man in the community. He pretty much raised so many of us who didn't have father figures. And I can remember him sitting outside of the then Tacoma Park Junior High School, Pawnee Branch Road, with his paddle when we came out of school, waiting to discipline any of us who weren't acting accordingly. And just the great work he did with the Boys and Girls Club gave me the passion that I needed to continue what I saw in his efforts when I became of age and working with the Boys and Girls Club, and the many people who followed him, the Tony Langlings of the world, the Otis and Tony Langley, Otis. I'm trying to think of some more names of the people who came behind him, who did great work in the community and provided those father figures for so many of us. So I spoke last week on the impact of Kenny Jones and an appreciation of his life, but I would be remiss if I didn't speak on how important the life of Lee Jordan was for me as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Gilbert. Do we have any other Councilmember Schlegel?
Thank you, Mayor Searcy. And thank you, Councilmember Gilbert, for sharing more about Lee Jordan. And I so appreciated hearing the full resolution. And it's so important for us to hear these stories. And it's just something I've been thinking, is that if there are ways that maybe our Arts and Humanities Commission could just do community storytelling events so that we could all hear more about the recent and more distant past of this great community. So I wanted to thank Mr. Ibrahim for speaking on behalf of that measure. And the word that jumped out to me when I was reading it over was that there would be no displacement of the residents. And that's very important. And I'm glad that you found a partner like that. Mr. Masterson, I appreciated your very close analysis down to the inches. And I'll tell you, that came up in our WACO community Zoom just last night that me and the city manager were part of, talking about just those details at intersections and how important it is to get it right for visibility and for safety in those conflict points. So I really appreciate that. And regarding that WACO meeting, thank you to Bruce Moyer, head of WACO, and all the residents who came out. It was just a great session. Lots of people who'd gotten themselves very informed and had great questions, and a lot of respectful, thoughtful listening and exchanging of views. Some of the issues that came up were the budget, tax duplication, street safety, and the urgency of the stormwater issue for many houses in that neighborhood. I participated in briefings from Recreation Director Greg Clark and Deputy Director Debbie Huffman this week, as well as our librarian Jessica Jones. They were extremely informative. I'm very grateful to those staff members. Also to Public Works Director Daryl Braithwaite for her responsiveness on so many issues. Just to throw one out there, because Mary Machui was talking about speed humps, a degraded speed hump on Poplar Avenue, where it's just as soon as the resident pointed it out, she said, yeah, we're going to take a look and we'll get a patching crew in there. I wanted to thank the residents who came out for office hours last week, about 15 or so, and the ones who my heart goes out to are the federal workers and contractors who've been hit so hard. And I hope we can all not just keep thinking about them, but be thinking about what we as a community, perhaps as a city, can do. And I will be having office hours tomorrow evening, 6:30 to 8 o'clock at the Girl and the Vine. So 6:30 to closing time at the Girl and the Vine tomorrow evening. Hope to see anybody there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Hanzak?
Thank you. My mic's on? Yeah. I first wanted to say how much I enjoyed the National Symphony Orchestra that was playing. I saw council member, I'm blanking. I saw my fellow council member, Jessica there, and at Sligo Adventist Church. And it was just beautiful. Actually, what was really cool was that the church was packed, and I have never seen it that packed. I've never seen that many people in our neighborhood all at once. So that was really, really neat. On upcoming WAU reached out to me, and that does not happen very often, and they asked if I could please help them share out that they're going to have an event on February 26th. It's a business forum, and they will be featuring a panel of industry leaders, including Gary Clark, who was a former Washington Commanders wide receiver, and several others from JP Morgan, Elite Access Management, and real estate investment. So that'll be at 2:30 p.m. Wednesday, February 26th in the Student Activity Center, Building 5 on campus, and they will also have refreshments. And I want to thank Ward 5 resident Mr. Masterson for coming out. I don't know that I've seen you out here before, and I really am so delighted that you took so much time thoughtfully. We will read this carefully, and maybe we can discuss it with our Director of Public Works and our manager and just see if they have any thoughts to feed back to you. Thank you for giving us things to think about that are really important. And thank you to Mr. Reed, Mr. Hussein, who spoke. Thank you. That was very helpful to have that background. And I do hope we can support that call to action. And thank you, Mary Jane Machui. And two other things. I guess first, I just want to look to my side to the mayor, and I hope you don't mind if I say in Black History Month, I would like to recognize our first Black mayor. I am so proud to be in a city right now. I would always be, but I'm especially proud right now to be sitting by the side of this mayor, and not because she's Black, but because that isn't the issue, that we have such an amazing mayor, and that there are so many people across this country right now who seem to be struggling with race issues. And I think I just was overwhelmed with the need to say that, given our history as a city, and also that I'm sitting on my other side with a council member who lived here and told your story about your childhood. I couldn't be prouder to serve with you, and I hope that as a white woman that we do you honor. And try to work side by side with you towards a future that is still has a hell of a lot of work to do, unfortunately. And then finally, I just received a message while I'm sitting on the dais, and I hope I can just read out a couple points from it. It's from one of my residents, Alex, who served as a tenant association president in Essex House for a number of years through COVID, and it was a really tough time. And a lot of times, in fact, most of the time when I hear from her, it's something that isn't always so beautiful. But tonight, she took the time to thank some individuals in our community and in her building, and I just want to read their names out quickly. One of them is Miss Sakdia Suyad, who won an Azalea Award in 2024 and worked in our after-school program in Essex House. Miss Nefemi Olugbemiga, Mr. Akeem Smith, and Mr. Jonathan Harden, all of whom she said are an exceptional team and have worked hard over many, many years in the after-school program there. Also, Ms. Sherwanda Oliver, who is an amazing lady who hasn't missed a day of work during the pandemic. And after long days of work, she volunteered her time every day and even weekends to distribute food, deliver holiday gifts, and so much more. And finally, Ms. Terry Miner, who is a newer resident to Tacoma Park, but has really stepped up and stepped into our community in the most amazing way. And she's become invaluable to many Essex House tenants, taking them food deliveries, coordinating Christmas gifts for all the children in the building, going to take people to the hospital and back again, and making sure that people are staying healthy in the building when there aren't enough helping hands to go around. So I'd just like to thank all of those individuals. And thank you, Alex, for bringing them to our attention.
Wonderful. Thank you, Councilmember Hanzak. Councilmember DeBala.
Yes, just very quickly, with regarding Mr. Lee. A couple of years ago, Historic Tacoma did a short half-hour film. They called him Mr. Lee, and it is still on YouTube. For anybody who would want to watch it, I would recommend it. It's wonderful, and it features a lot of people you probably know. Mm-hmm. So they called him Mr. Lee. Historic Tacoma. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember DeBala. First, I just want to say a heartfelt "I'm with you" to all of our federal employees in the city.
Yes.
I'm a federal worker, and I know how stressful it is not knowing one day to the next, 1 week to the next, one email to the next, about whether or not your job is secure. Many received termination notices over the weekend for being probationary. And so I think it's just really, really, really important for us all to have compassion and empathy for the disruption that's happening for so many of our neighbors in terms of their livelihood and their financial security. I want to encourage all federal workers to please, please, please sign up for notifications from your congressional leadership. Congressman Raskin and Van Hollen had a town hall recently. It's really important for you to be able to tap in to learn not only about their stance on the issues, but also particular resources that may be available. It's also important for you to connect with your state congressional leadership. I know our District 20 delegation has been working to try to move laws forward that might help to do things like expanding the amount of unemployment insurance that people may be able to receive. And they're working diligently to make sure that there are resources that may be available to Marylanders who may be caught in the fray of what's happening in terms of the federal workforce. So I do want to encourage people to please, please, please connect to the various state and federal leadership. We are working within the city to try to identify additional resources that we can make available, but I definitely want to encourage folks to do their due diligence, to connect and to learn about resources that may be made available. I want to thank all of the individuals that came out tonight to provide comments. Thank you, Mr. Masterson, for your comments on public safety. I know what it's like when you're making that turn and you're trying to make sure that you're not hitting an oncoming vehicle, so I appreciate you for highlighting that. Mr. Reed, thank you so much. I thought that that event was happening this Sunday, but it's March, it's in 2 weeks. March 2nd, so I may be able to make it after all, so I'm going to put it on my calendar. Excellent. And I do want to thank Mr. Abraham for coming in and talking about what your experience has been with the Duval and really just putting a face with the situation. And it's always helpful for us when we're making decisions to be able to connect with the residents that'll be impacted by our decisions. So thank you very much. And Ms. Machui, if you're still listening, Eric's Law, the city did write testimony in support of that bill. And what we heard during the District 20 night in Annapolis is Delegate Wilkins is really championing that effort to try to get that bill passed. So we don't know just yet whether or not it's made it through, but we do know that there are folks that represent you that are advocating for that bill to pass. Real quick, Play Day was awesome. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Had a fantastic time. I want to thank Let's Play America for again putting on an amazing event. We are so fortunate as a community to have nonprofit organizations like that just really have a mission of just bringing people together. So I want to thank them for that. Also want to give a special shout out to the organizers of the 2025 Maryland Civic Education Summit. It was a wonderful opportunity for me to facilitate a panel on community partnerships, speaking to students, college students, high school students, as well as their different nonprofit organizations around ways in which we can better leverage youth when it comes to civic engagement and community engagement. So thank you so much for that. I mentioned the District 20 night a lot, but I want to give a special thank you to our District 20 delegation that honored Mr. Terry Siemens on Monday during District 20 night. So he received proclamations from the House as well as the Senate. So it was great to see Terry and to witness him being recognized. Just as a reminder, we'll be attending tomorrow the Maryland Municipal League chapter meeting. I think there was a few of us that will be going. The county executive will be there, and we will also discuss tax duplication. I'm also going to try to make it by Olive Lounge to see who's there in terms of the unhappy hour for feds. So being that I'm one of you, I do not mind stopping by to see how many of my colleagues are there enjoying Olive Lounge. And I'm also super excited. Tomorrow I have an opportunity to attend the Youth Council meeting. So I think I see a couple of our youth council members here tonight, and I'm looking forward to meeting with you all tomorrow. And so with that, I'm going to turn things over to our city manager, Mr. DeSpirito, for city manager comments.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council, and our guests this evening. I have a very brief report, given that we have a lot to discuss this evening. I want to repeat one more time for this Friday, February 21st, from the Housing and Community Development Department. In celebration of Black History Month, 5 powerhouse Black artists will perform in Milan and Hughes, a unforgettable evening of storytelling and expression, celebrating the rich tapestry of Black experiences. The featured poets from Have a Voice Entertainment include Nerd the Poet, DJ Art Is, Poetic Soul, Miko Reed, and Stan Kells. The group has performed at the National Museum of African American History, the Woolly Mammoth Theater, Arena Stage, Atlas Performing Arts Center, and other venues. The performance will begin at 7:30 p.m. here at the Community Center, 7500 Maple Avenue, on Friday, February 21st. And finally, from the City Manager's Office, a shout out from my office to Christine Heidebrecht, the Executive Assistant in the City Manager's Office, would like to recognize Ramon Sola and Rick Baravecchia, both from our Housing and Community Development Department, for their assistance on a massive organizing project that required hefting 60 heavy boxes filled with paperwork numerous times until they were in their final home. They then assisted with the finishing work to ensure a nice, clean space to work in. So this has to do with our archiving and records. So thank you to Ramon and Rick, sincerely. And this concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you very much, City Manager DeSpirito. And so we're going to move into our presentations for this evening. The first presentation is presentations from Long Branch Business League, Tacoma Langley Crossroads Development Authority, and the Old Tacoma Business Association.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. Devin McNally here with the Department of Housing and Community Development. I'm very excited tonight to introduce our 3 business associations that serve our local businesses in the city of Tacoma Park. They represent over 300 businesses and provide an enormous wealth of local jobs for our residents, but then additionally, the roughly $1.5 million in tax revenue that we receive from commercial properties in the city. They provide a wide range of services and resources to their the membership of their business associations, everything from business coaching, assistance in locating grants, marketing, and in some cases, revolving loan funds as well. So I will turn it over to them, and we will start with Chris Gillis from the Montgomery Housing Partnership, representing the Long Branch Business League. So.
Hi, good evening, Mayor Searcy, council members. Good to be with you. My name is Chris Gillis. I'm the Director of Policy and Neighborhood Development at MHP. In practical terms, that means that we're 2 different heads at MHP. I manage MHP's policy activities, so we're mostly active at the local and state level. And then I also manage our community development work, which includes supporting small businesses. Also joining me tonight is a colleague, Paul Grenier. He works extensively in the Long Branch neighborhood, so I wanted to acknowledge him as well. Many of you are probably already familiar with MHP in our role as being an affordable housing provider, but fewer people are aware of the community development work that we're doing. So I'm happy to have an opportunity tonight to share more with you about that work. So MHP's been working in the Long Branch neighborhood for over 15 years, but we've really tried to accelerate this work in the last 5 to 6 years with the impending arrival of the Purple Line. There's been a lot of concern from the small business community for a long time about possible displacement, rents rising, those kinds of things. So we're trying to not only protect the businesses that are there now, keep them in business through the Purple Line construction period, but also setting them up to be successful for once the Purple Line opens. So I'll talk more about that. And this first slide is just to kind of orient you in terms of when I talk about Long Branch, this is the areas we're talking about in terms of our service territory. So there in the center, you have the commercial core at the intersection of Flower Avenue and Piney Branch. And you have these 3 smaller nodes, which are all about a little bit under a half mile away from that center commercial area. So to the west, you have the commercial hub anchored by La Casita. To the east, you have the intersection of Piney Branch and University. And then further to the south, this has been a newer addition to the area that we're serving. This is the Erie Flower Avenue node, anchored by Matsakunda and Coma Cafe. And we, like I say, haven't been working there as long as some of the other areas. So we've been mostly focused on outreach. But this service area, we serve about 130 businesses roughly. Obviously, we only have about 1.5 FTEs serving this area. So our ability to serve all of those businesses is, difficult, but we make the same offer to all the businesses. Not all avail themselves of the services that we provide. This is a little bit about what we do, just kind of a snapshot. Very focused always on physical improvements, so helping individual small businesses with facade improvements. Last year, several of you came out to the relighting ceremony for the restored facade for the Flower Theater, so we're very happy about that. Also do other things to beautify the neighborhood, like install planter boxes and things like that sort. And then where things kind of exceed our capacity, because we're just a nonprofit, we advocate to governments to take on improvements of their own. So we were very instrumental in Montgomery County government agreeing to undertake a whole streetscape renewal project on Flower Avenue. And that's been a big priority of the business community for a long time, and that will kind of come up right up to the boundary of Tacoma Park. And the streetscape there, if you've ever been there, it's very dated. It's been almost 45 years since it was last touched. And so again, we're very excited about this, and knock on wood, construction on that will begin next year. And this includes the Flower Avenue bike lanes as well. So, but new street poles, new landscaping, all of that. Also engaged in implementing public art. I think we're almost up to 10 murals that we have in Long Branch, and we've got a couple in the pipeline. We're just corresponding with Councilmember Honzak about some opportunities as well that she's identified. So that's another area we're working on. Marketing, we manage a couple of social media channels, primarily on Instagram through @Discover Long Branch. So always marketing the larger business district as well as the individual businesses that make up the business community. And we do some advertising as well. And more recently, a new tool we have for marketing is we launched a new community newspaper. We publish it quarterly, and we have 2 newspaper boxes that we've installed in that commercial core area that I mentioned, but we're hoping to install a 3rd newspaper box at that core, at the node where Matsakunda is in the not too distant future. And we're really proud of this. The publication is called La Verdad de Long Branch, which translates to the truth of Long Branch. And it's just another way, and we're very happy too, because every article is translated into English and Spanish. It's just another tool to kind of share the businesses that make up the community. Also doing a lot around community events. When I joined MHP 6 years ago, we only had a handful of events. Now we have multiple events almost every single month of the year. So we've really ramped it up, and we were really happy last year. We had a brand new event called Flower Avenue Together, again at that Erie Flower Avenue hub. That drew out a couple hundred residents, but that kind of exceeded our expectations, so hoping to replicate that again this year. And our big event every year is the Long Branch Festival, which happens in September, but that festival draws almost 5,000 people, but some of our smaller events draw a couple hundred people. Then we're also engaged in supporting the Long Branch Business League. We helped kind of jumpstart the league many years ago, and that's kind of a lot of what Paul does. The Business League, it has its own independent leadership comprised. It's the Small Business Association, so leadership comprised of the small business owners, but we do provide a lot of support to them, kind of setting the agenda, organizing the meetings, identifying speakers, also helping them kind of amplify their voices when it comes to advocacy, whether at the county or state level. So we remain very involved in supporting the operations of the Business League, even though it is independent from MHP. And then lastly, we provide all matters of technical assistance, kind of anything that is preventing the business from being successful. We help them with, if we can't help them directly, we try and connect them with another service provider that can help them. But a little bit of what we do a lot of websites. Many of our businesses, they're just not connected to the internet, don't have that kind of online discovery. So we help them establish websites. Also we have a social media consultant that provides technical assistance to businesses if they want to establish a social media account or get better at it, but better utilize it. And since COVID, we've been doing a lot around grant applications with businesses. Now, in the last week we had the new Purple Line Construction Impact Grant open, so we're already very involved in helping many businesses apply for that, because that's a lifeline during this difficult period for them. And go back, there you go. So a big milestone for us this year is that we will soon be hopefully applying to the state to designate Long Branch as a state designated Main Street. So yeah, that's right. So Tacoma Park will then now be home to 2 Main Streets, which is very exciting. It's been a long journey to get here, and the application is very lengthy. So hopefully before the end of the month, though, we'll submit our application. Very thankful to Mayor Searcy and the others for supporting, providing a letter of support to the state. And so the area you see highlighted in yellow here, that's going to be the boundaries of the Main Street program. The state, they kind of encourage us to have a little bit more of a compact area when it came to the boundaries of the Main Street program, because that's typically, what they like to see. But they were clear to us that doesn't preclude us from continuing to support all the businesses that we're used to. It's just a certain portion of our work will have to be concentrated here, which we already a lot of our work does tend to be focused in that area. And for what it's worth, there are about 8 businesses in the city of Tacoma Park that fall within these boundaries. And I did mention earlier, it's about 18 or so businesses inside the city of Tacoma Park that we support, give or take 1 or 2. So nearly 20 businesses. So yeah, really happy that, part of the boundaries here will be inside the city of Tacoma Park. And the state also made clear that they're also open to us expanding the boundaries over time. This is just kind of a starting point for us. But yeah, so I think when it's official, we'd love to have some of you out. We'll do some kind of public ceremony at some point to, mark the occasion. And then lastly, just kind of wanted to touch on what we're going to be busy on here in the next 12 months. We did receive a grant from the state, a Project Restore 2.0 grant to activate vacant spaces, and the Flower Theater is obviously vacant right now. So we're hoping before the end of the year, we'll activate a portion of the theater. To renovate the entire theater would be somewhere between $3 and $4 million, which we don't have right now. We're very optimistic, though, over time we can secure that. But for the time being, we have this $300,000 grant to activate the theater. So we're hoping to at least open it back up to the public. Every time I'm changing the message on the marquee there, people are stopping me, retelling their memories of the theater, saying when it's going to reopen. So hopefully I'll have some good news to share soon. We'll open a portion of the theater, but not all of it. Then I mentioned securing the Main Street designation from the state of Maryland. Hopefully that will happen here in the first half of this year. We also received a grant from the state of Maryland to launch our own facade improvement program. So in the past, we've been very modest in what we've undertaken, just looking at individual store facades. But these new state resources, it'll enable us to look at renovating an entire commercial strip now, as opposed to just kind of one-offs between individual businesses. So very excited about that, because that just enables us to do much more. So more on that later. As I mentioned, we've launched this new community newspaper, and readership is growing rapidly on that. We also, just in the last 6 months, we secured physical space for us, kind of a brick and mortar location in Long Branch. So we're leasing a space. If you're familiar with Reliable Dry Cleaners on Flower Avenue, we're renting a garage from them that's kind of behind. It's about 900 square feet. So that'll enable us to have more boots on the ground, have staff there. So it's not much to look at right now, but we need to build out that space. We're working with an architect and an interior designer to build out that space, and then we can have community meetings, those sorts of things, meetings with elected officials as well. So, and then it'll be kind of a base of operations for us. And then with the launch of the Main Street program, we'll hire a dedicated, full-time employee to manage the Main Street program that will greatly enhance our capacity to serve the small businesses there. So very excited about that. And then lastly, again, just supporting the small businesses during the Purple Line construction period. That's always a huge priority for us. I think, we're still faced with another probably 1.5 to 2 years of, construction. Hopefully the worst is behind us. I think, a lot of the track has been laid in the ground now. So I hope things will ease, but just anecdotally from what we've heard from a lot of businesses, revenues were kind of down about 30%, 40%, off of historical norms. So, and the construction impact grants only, they're only recovering a portion of their losses. So that concludes my presentation. Happy to take any questions now or later, and I can turn it over to the next presenter. Thanks.
I think we're going to allow for the other presenters and then ask any questions at the end, if that's okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris. Next up, we have Laura Barclay with the Old Tacoma Business Association.
Good evening. Thanks for this opportunity. I'm Laura Barclay. I'm the executive director of the Old Tacoma Business Association. I'm on 13 years in the job, which is kind of crazy saying that. I'd like to, happy to use this opportunity to give you a look at what we were doing in 2024 and a look ahead into 2025. I thought because we have some new council members, just to give you a little background on our organization, we were started in 2003 by both businesses on the Maryland and the DC line. Our area of oversight is the area around the metro. We are Montgomery County's first official only Maryland Main Street, but now there will be two. And we are nationally accredited. We are also a membership organization, which is not mandatory. Basically, we encourage our businesses to join, but we don't treat any business differently if they're not a member. We're also considered a place-based economic development organization. So as I mentioned, we straddle the Maryland-DC border. We run from the Tacoma Theater, which is 4th and Butternut in the district, and we go to the Co-op and across the street to Carroll and Lee there. We've got about 175 businesses with about 100 of them on the Maryland side. We have about 140,000 square feet of retail space, and right now the range is anywhere between 30 and 50 a square foot that it's renting for. Here is a map of our area of oversight, with the dark blue being DC and the light blue being Maryland, and everything clustered around Carroll Avenue and Carroll Street Northwest. So we organize ourselves as a traditional Main Street. So you can go into a Main Street organization that's been accredited, and we have the same 4 points that we operate under. We focus on economic development, promotion, design, and organization, which is sort of how we organize ourselves as a business. I'm going to provide my report within those 4 categories, and it's how I report to the city basically on a quarterly basis that kind of fall into those categories as well. So from a economic development standpoint, as Chris mentioned, technical assistance is key. It's day-to-day support of our businesses, could be a little bit of anything. How do I do something? Where do I go to find this? The range is broad. We also work on business recruitment and retention. Recruitment, we're 100% leased now on the Tacoma Park, Maryland side, so it's hard to go recruit people when you don't have space available. We also focus on grant opportunities, so writing grants so that I can create sub-grants for our businesses, and we provide access to capital to our businesses as a method of business support. So in 2024, we hosted the following workshops and events for our businesses. We had a couple of networking events. We actually got our health and wellness providers together for the first time. We have so many of them that are hidden away on second floors that sublease space from other ones. So we're working to gather those health and wellness providers and create a master list so we can do a health and wellness promotion, but we also gave them the list so they can use it for referrals. We hosted a workshop using one of our businesses, Digital Inc., who hosted this for free for other businesses, called Digital Marketing Review. And we also hosted a safety meeting in 2024 after we had a period of break-ins. So from a grant perspective, we have distributed, and it's over the past 4 years, $458,000 to our local businesses. Obviously, that was during the pandemic. So you can look at in 2024, 51,000 of that 458 was distributed last year. Our number bumps back up, I think, as everybody's trying to use ARPA funds or the state's trying to use their federal funds. So we have an additional 340,000 that we're distributing this year. And I'll give you the breakdown. The 300 is Project Restore grant. So just like the Flower Avenue Theater will be able to use some of that for rehabilitation, we have $300,000 that we've been given to rehabilitate 6950 Carroll Avenue, which is the Bank of America building, which will be Sangfroid Distillery, and 7312 Carroll Avenue, which is the former Tacoma Framers space, which will be Richardson School of Music. We have a $25,000 State of Maryland Main Street Improvement Grant that we just finished distributing to our businesses. I wrote the last check today. That $25,000 created $80,000 in improvements in our local businesses. We had a match grant, and then they spent above and beyond. So businesses were able to repair HVAC systems. We had people, businesses adding new storage to their business, fixing their overhead hoods in their restaurants. So that money, that 25 went a long way. We also are currently using a $25,000 Montgomery County Place-Based Management Grant that we received from the county. This is the second year that they've been offering this grant and the second year we've received it. That will go to administrative costs at OTBA. And lastly, we have a $46,750,000 DC Small Business Grant, which part of that will go into sub-grants to our DC businesses, because obviously we keep all the money very separate. So we have a sub-grant that we'll be introducing there. Plus operational administrative fees. And then some of this money went to installing the wreaths on the DC side of our Main Street for the holidays. And lastly, not a grant, but our contract for economic development services with the city is also out there in 2025, or from fiscal year 25. Whoops. Okay, what am I doing wrong now? Oh, there we go. Okay, we have a revolving loan fund that we offer to our businesses in terms of economic support. It was introduced in 2009, and it was made up of a couple of grants from the state of Maryland. And to date, we've made 25 loans. We have 5 active right now, but those loans have totaled over $843,000. They go out, it comes back in with interest, goes out, comes back in, and we just keep the money rolling. And $170,000 has gone a long way. We also manage the Shop Tacoma gift card, and this is an online a gift card that electronic gift card that people can use across multiple participating Tacoma businesses. We've opened this up to all businesses in Tacoma Park. They're welcome to sign up to participate as well. So to date, we've sold over 500 e-cards, and they value over $36,000 that's gone back into our businesses. The second point of how we operate is focus on promotion. So our quarter marketing program. So we run the Commercial District Main Street Tacoma website. This has a community calendar that's highly used to post events in Tacoma Park. We use that to create our e-newsletter that goes out weekly with what's happening in Tacoma Park. We also run the social media, prepare press releases for our businesses. Was doing this a lot more when the businesses were sort of new. Now we've got some pretty sophisticated business operators that the press is knocking on their door. So, but I'm happy to say, you know, we got them in, and it's happening more organically now. I also send out information to the neighborhoods with what's happening in our community. And we have a separate business listserv to the businesses that I send separate information to them to keep them updated on various things. So what a year for press we had in 2024. It was a dream come true with all of the, every publication that we got into was exactly where we wanted to be, from being Washingtonian's very best restaurants to the Washington Post Food Critics Dining Guide. So these, having this, it correlates directly into more people coming in our community. And what we've learned is that we need more than just Tacoma Park to support our small businesses. So we've got people, you know, coming from Virginia to check out new restaurants. So it's really, it's so exciting to see this happen. We also run events to promote the area, to draw people to the community. We hosted 7 events in 2024, and we'll be hosting the same 7 in 2025. But we've tracked these bring in well over 20,000 people to our community to check out these events. We've had businesses that have had record days on the days that we have had events. And, you know, if a business doesn't have a record day, we just hope that, you know, we've created some awareness for a future visit when they come in for an event. This is just a shot from the street festival this year. So Sam Kittner takes great pictures. But funny thing, I had not realized that I selected this photo with our with our city manager smack dab in the middle there. So, but a great day in Tacoma Park. This, you know, streets are packed on a sunny day. This is Tacoma Park at its very best. Also, from a promotion standpoint, we do promotional campaigns. So in 2024, we did Play Local with summer camp with Tacoma Summer Camps. Take a Second Look, which is a promotion that we highlighted second floor, off-street, and hidden businesses, and we create a holiday gift guide. So we're doing repeat on those in 2025, but we also just did Love Your Local last week. We gave everybody 25 reasons to love their local businesses for Valentine's Day, and we're working on the health and wellness promotion that I mentioned. We also do partner event support, and it helps us with streetery activation. So we had 7 partners in 2024. 7 local organizations that we help support them running their events in our commercial district, which do the same thing. They attract visitors, highlight the local businesses, make for a vibrant and active commercial district. Design is the other one of the 4 points of the Main Street organization, and our placemaking activities, we're adding the wreaths this year, and that was so exciting. It was many years in the making, trying to get multiple grants on both sides of the line to be able to purchase the wreaths, install the wreaths. So in November, we installed over 80 wreaths, 60 on the Maryland side, and the additional 22, I believe, on the DC side. But very exciting to see that all come together. We've had so much really great response to that. We also had a little money left over with a grant last year, and we're able to add these tables to BY Morrison Park at the Tacoma Junction, so they match what's on Laurel Avenue. And then while the tent on the right-hand side of the screen looks familiar, it actually was missing for a year because someone stole it. So we were able to replace this giant tent on Laurel. So everything's in place now, again, on Laurel Avenue. Just briefly, state of the commercial district. So in 2024, we had 7 businesses open, 4 on the Maryland side, 3 on the DC side. So Muitu, Red Hound, San Pancho, and Tacoma Music School in Tacoma Park, Maryland. We also celebrated the expansion of 3 businesses. So Cielo Rojo just transformed the former auto repair shop, which is so exciting to see. Indigo Plant Design, it was a small plant shop that took over 3 spaces upstairs at 7000 Carroll, and then Tacoma Bicycle moved from its original home in Tacoma Park on Carroll Avenue down to the Junction. Coming in 2025, we've got 4 businesses that we're anticipating. So Laurel Leaf is just such a great Tacoma Park success story. So this is the business that's taking over Tacoma Vision space on Laurel Avenue. This is 3 women from Tacoma Park are opening the Laurel Leaf business. So we love when our residents open businesses in town. Additionally, 2 of the women had second floor small spaces. So they had very small businesses to start. There really wasn't available street front space. Might have been too big for them anyway at the time. They took these small second floor spots, created their business, grew their business, and now they're ready to move to Main Street, if you will. So we're super excited about that. Mid-March, we'll hopefully be announcing their opening. And then Sangfro Distillery, another Tacoma Park resident success story where resident Jeff Harner had his distillery in Hyattsville, totally outgrew his space, maximized his production capacity, and he was able to purchase the Bank of America building to put his business there. And after 2 years of permitting fun, everything's moving along, which is great. On the DC side, we've got Peach Cobbler Factory, which is a dessert shop that if you've driven by there, everything's ready to go. They're just waiting on a few more things from with permitting, and they should be open the next couple weeks. And then we have an unnamed grocery on Cedar Street where eLife Restaurant used to be, so right under the metro, next to El Sabor, Mexico. So those will be opening soon, and then we'll be looking at the expansion of Richardson School of Music as they move into the Tacoma Framer space. What does that leave us with? We have one available space right now at 6902 4th Street Northwest, only on the DC side, nothing on the Maryland side. The 3 businesses that I've listed with asterisks below, these are all new construction, or the 300 to 306, 218 Cedar, those are new construction, not quite ready to put tenants yet. And then 268 Carroll Street, for those, it's the former Frederick Dry Cleaner and Electric Maid spaces. They're going through environmental remediation, so I don't know when that will ever come online, because we've seen firsthand in Tacoma Park how long that can take. And then we have various office spaces still available. So that concludes my overview. I just want to leave it for council consideration. We are hopeful that, I know it's going to be a tough budget year, but continued OTBA funding in fiscal year 26. Additionally, we will be, we'll have an additional expense of $10,000 for installing wreaths on the Tacoma Park, Maryland side. This is installation and removal. This will be a new annual expense that we are now incurring. I'd like to, if the city can look to supplement or to offset any of that. Also, for the new council members, we had a letter to the city, the previous council back in the fall, asking for full closure of Laurel Avenue on weekends and lifting parking restrictions near the commercial district. I'd just like to ask for continued consideration of those requests. And just all of us to keep an eye on the 410 and Carroll intersection. It's still not working well. And there's opportunity for improvement there. And I think as more people go back to work, more cars on the road, we're going to see that get worse. So thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura. Last but not least, with the Tacoma Langley Crossroads Development Authority, we have Javier Rivas.
Hello, good evening. My name is Javier Rivas, current Executive Director of the Tacoma Langley Crossroads Development Authority. Thank you for your time and for inviting us here. I do have to say, I have learned so much from the 2 people that came before me, and I would be remiss to not offer my public thanks to them. I think this work is not easy, and it's not we're not able to do it by ourselves. I think it happens in collaboration, and so I'm happy to call them colleagues, friends, advisors, and yeah, we're always available for each other. So I think that says a lot about Tacoma Park and the business community here. All right, just a quick overview of the location of the commercial district. As you're aware, I'm sure, we have 2 busy state highways running right through them, through our commercial district. We're bounded by University Boulevard and New Hampshire Avenue, both state highways. The northwestern section is bounded by Carroll Avenue. Southern section is bounded by Merwood Drive, I think, a little before Merwood Drive at the IHOP, if you know where the IHOP is. And on University Boulevard on the east, that is, it's not a street, but it's bounded by the Pollo Campero, if you know Pollo Campero. So yeah, it's about, I'll give you a little background on the history for the new council members, right? So it's been founded in 1987, and it was then that the city council gave us the authority to levy this fee that funds the commercial, the organization, right? So and this fee is levied on business and property owners that are located within our boundary. So and we're a 501c6 business association. Our bylaws established that our board is consists of business and property owners from the district. Currently, there's 6 of 11 seats filled. Looking forward to fill more. Obviously, that's one of the priorities for me. And, this year we welcome Councilmember Westlake to the advisory seat. It's historically Ward 6 council member, has served as an advisory seat, non-voting member, ex officio member. So thank you so much. And also, in terms of funding, aside from the fees that we collect from our members, we have obviously the city contract for economic development services. And also, we're currently focusing on state and county grant opportunities, which has not been, let's say, a focus of the organization in the past. And so, yeah, we're happy to report that we have been able to receive some funding via the state, and yeah, took a lot of work, and also the county. So in terms of our business composition, so it's about 60%, 40% professional services, 60% retail. And those goods and services really target the surrounding population. Currently it's about 80% Central American immigrants on the Prince George's County side. And that's the population that is shopping at the commercial district. And it's been known as the international corridor for this reason, that it's housed waves of immigration in Takoma Park, right? And, I've seen, you can see the changes. You can see different waves of different groups displaced from their countries because of interventions. But yeah, we've been the hub for immigrant entrepreneurship in Maryland. And as also, the first time I announced that when I meet someone that I work for the Crossroads, they're like, "Oh, the farmers market." I was like, no, like it takes place within the commercial district on Ann Street, as you know, starting on April 23rd. I'm happy to also serve on the board of the Crossroads Community Food Network as well. So happy to have that partnership. And recently we undertook a strategic planning engagement with a consultant, and this is something that needed some updating. And I guess I didn't say that it's only been about a year and some change for me being in this position, right? And so, yeah, I still can call myself new, I think. And I'm still really learning the history of the organization and forging connections with the businesses, right? I think it's so important to have that personal connection and be culturally competent, service provider, right, for the community that is there. So yeah, so you can read the vision and our core values. Of course, again, inclusivity, innovation, and community empowerment, and the stewardship of space. Again, mission, not quite something that existed before. Whenever it was presented, it was maybe a set of tasks, and so not the why of why we're doing the work, right? And so just the how. And so this is recently drafted mission. I presented it to the board. It has, they haven't adopted it officially, but our mission as it stands now is to support and enhance the vitality of the Tacoma-Langley Crossroads Commercial District through strategic marketing, safety initiatives, and collaborative efforts for a welcoming and prosperous business community. And I still need time to just be able to memorize that and have my elevator pitch. But yeah, so also, anything that we do will always point to our North Star, economic vitality, again, cultural inclusivity, and community well-being. Out of this, also strategic consulting that we engaged in. Yeah, I think, and this is stuff that came, that I knew coming in, and I had it all in my head, and I think it all needed to be just put down on paper, and now it's there, and then we're acting on it immediately, right? So, it's important to just, since we do levy this tax on every business and every property owner, we need to make sure we know them and they know what we do, and we're able to explain to them what we do, that we're communicating our mission, vision, it's clear to them, and that there's a value in that, right? There's also more marketing, right, which continues to be a priority, but not just for the businesses, but also for our partners and our community, right? And so folks can learn what we do. Expanding, looking. I come from business coaching prior to this position, so I'm proud to have a wide network of service providers. So I'm going to focus on bringing in those service providers to the area if we can't provide that service ourselves. We're a small, nimble organization. And really, working on civic engagement for businesses, empowering them to use their voice, and always prioritizing, again, the safety, beautification via litter cleanup and murals and such, and creating a solid district identity. Just a quick review of what we've done in the past year, and this is just a little microcosm of, you can even see this, right? The microcosm of like the diversity that exists within our district, right? We have a Salvadoran immigrant, that opened a beauty salon, and she's months open, right? She's only been here for a few months. McDoris Fashion Fabrics, Nigerian fabric store owner. They're from Nigeria. They're actually now in Nigeria. But yeah, and then they needed support with some SEO and online sales. And then also Pretty Fashion, South Asian woman-owned business. And she's been at the district for 36 years, right? So it's like, someone that's brand new, someone that's been here for like 15 years, and someone who's been here 36 years, right? And continues to provide services to their community, goods and services. Something, we've been actively, again, as part of a priority, communicating what we're doing to our members and to our stakeholders, and it's, people are reading it, and that means that people are accessing grants and resources that live on our website, which is a new addition, and it's folks are using that to apply for the Purple Line grant, like it's already been talked about. And so we're going to continue working on that readership and again, just that one-on-one connection. So also in terms of our safety and advocacy, obviously Purple Line is on everybody's mind, right? And so we're proud to say that the application that is available now is incorporated some language that we introduced, along with partners from the Purple Line Coral Coalition. And so, I'm proud to know that that's now included in the grant application. We also have purchased some mobile trailers that are being used by the Tacoma Park City Police. They have direct access, and they use that as a deterrent for crime and also in investigations. And you might be able to talk to some police officers. It is difficult sometimes to access camera data from property owners, and so this gives them a little bit more ability to see it and aid in investigation as well. And as part of our community well-being, that's one of our first big advocacy campaigns, was to advocate against the opening of the 6th liquor license in the commercial district, and that's within 25-quarter-mile radius. I'm sorry. And so, it was an interesting experience. It was an opportunity to connect with the neighbors who live with this, and have been advocating and have a lot of information about what's been going on in the commercial district for so long. We were able to understand the licensing process. It's not necessarily clear and transparent, what happens, when someone applies for a license, the kind of oversight that goes into that. And our research, we did a lot of research. We hired a consultant that provided some research on the correlation of off-site sales of liquor and violent crime, and it's clearly in the map, and I can provide that data to you. I mean, it's incredible what it shows, right? That where there is a density of liquor stores, and they tend to be in Black and brown neighborhoods, there's also a correlation with violent crimes. And so, yeah, and people are listening. There's a bill that's been introduced by the District 20 delegation, and it's related to that advocacy, and to make it more of a add language that's specific about the cumulative effect of these offsite sales of liquor on the surrounding community. So, we have always had a strong relationship with the University of Maryland, which is just down the road. Currently, we're working with 2 classes, and the goal is to refurbish 14 of about 39 planters that we have all throughout the district. And that's a studio art class, and then also an architecture class that's going to work on a prototype for seating, which again, it's something that's sorely needed in an area that's so busy and so heavily trafficked. There's very few islands of peace, let's say. We were able to apply for a grant through the state of Maryland's DHCD Community Health and Safety Works program. And this is, aimed toward increasing safety and security in the area via improvements, lighting improvements and security cameras. There's also an environmental component to it as well, and so we're working on that. Currently also working with the organization called Chalk Riot. You can see some of their work here. We're identifying areas where we could create some art that will bring not just a little color in our, our little corner of Tacoma that's been beaten up so much by the Purple Line, and all the development around it. But also again, it's all in the to serve as maybe add more visibility for pedestrians, right, and make it in a pretty way. Purple Line. Yeah, I mean, I've been at this since 2019, just working, supporting businesses along the Purple Line, and now I continue to do that, and I mean that helped me coming in and meeting some of the businesses because I had worked with them already in my previous job. So I'm very familiar with the ins and outs of it, and so we serve at the organization to navigate the shifting construction timelines and continuous disruptions, and provide liaison services to the construction company. Make sure people are getting the information in a clear way, which I think if you've signed up for the Purple Line updates, it's not the same as being able to say oh yes, a whole intersection is going to be closed for 6 weeks, which is coming, right? So March 28th is track work, along University Boulevard, and that's going to shut down that intersection basically, and again, cause a lot of disruptions, and I'm glad that there's a grant now, and that's kind of our all hands on deck. All 3 hands. Oh wait, no, 6 hands on deck. But yeah, so we've always been a small organization, 1.5 employees, so that's a priority for me, is to find some capacity building grants and add more capacity. We just recently had Callista and Rachel. Callista is an executive assistant and outreach coordinator, and also Rachel, who's has an amazing eye for marketing and photos, and she's also been working on our business directory, which was not very functional. And those profiles in the business directory actually serve for many of our businesses as their webpage. This is where folks can find them. But again, it's a huge improvement from what it was before, and it's going to be a continuing process. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Wow. Well, thank you so much for walking us through all of the amazing work that you all do. And with the number of FTE that you each have, you are you are carrying the lion's share. So I'm just going to just let my colleagues know we'll do about 10 minutes for questions. Just keeping in mind that we have additional work sessions for tonight. And are there any questions for the group of presenters? Oh, Councilmember Gilbert?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I was just curious if any of the other businesses who aren't under your umbrellas as far as geographically, have they reached out for support in any of the areas that you mentioned? I know that we have some businesses in the New Hampshire Avenue and East-West Highway area, those businesses at the New Hampshire Avenue and Eastern Avenue corridor, and we have a few businesses on Maple Avenue, 7600 block. So I'm just curious if any of you did any work with them or received any, outreach from any of them.
No, that's my answer. I think I have sometimes prior economic development directors have tried to connect resources through our knowledge of resources. Unfortunately, we're bounded by a specific geography, and I imagine that's the same case for our partners here. So.
Councilmember Hazak?
Yeah, while you're still there,
Oh, sure.
I was just curious, could you give us a sense of how much is added to the price of the square footage for a typical business owner to pay that levy that you talked about? I don't have a very good sense of just how that affects property prices and sort of where somebody would want to place their business. Do you have any idea?
It's in the municipal code, so it's set by the city. Yeah,
okay,
it's set by the city.
okay.
Off the top of my head, I think it's like 25 cents per square foot, and for retail, and there's another rate for service providers, services. There's another rate for property owners. So yeah, I think that's all.
And do I understand you correctly that levy alone helps to pay for like one FTE, or is that not enough to pay for a FTE person? No.
No.
Okay.
I mean, it's
Okay.
I think there's obviously we have spaces that are 200 square feet to 2,000, 3,000 square feet. So it varies, but the average tends to be about 200 a year, and to like a cap for certain, for retail businesses, the cap is like 4,000, and for property owners, it's 10,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm asking that more, I'm just trying to imagine what we could do in other parts of the city too in the future, if that's a model that could be considered for other places, and maybe not, but.
Yeah, that's something that I struggle with. I think there is, there's reason. I mean, I think there's, I don't know how to really explain this, but I think there is a challenge there, because in the past it has created a combative, relationship with our businesses that are our members. We have employed collections agencies and taken people to court, for this kind of to collect those fees, and it's not something that currently I'm looking to renew that practice. But also, I think again, coming in, being new, and knowing that there is some disengagement from the businesses and not a real understanding of what we do. That's also, I think, I want to make sure that they understand, right? And so, if they understand that where that fee is going to, right? And unless you're paying attention to a planter, or or you don't know who's picking up the litter, but it's our contractors, right? And so it's unless we're talking about it, unless we're taking pictures, unless we're really putting it out there, they don't know, right? And so. And the fact that, again, there has to be culturally competent service, and we have to be there and provide service to a community that generally is, I mean, there's many reasons for them to be suspicious of anybody walking into their space, right? And even if it's someone within Tacoma Langley, from the organization. And I think especially now, we've talked about losses, due to the Purple Line, but then now there's losses through the political environment, the real palpable fear that is out there. So, we're going to be distributing some know your rights cards, coming up. We just received them, so that's going to be then just one action that can just address that. But yeah, it's rough.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Javier. And I think that that raises, and I know Acting Director McNally probably hears this regularly. This is something that has been brought up time and time and time again, not just by this council, but prior councils around how do we make sure that we're providing support to those businesses that fall outside of the districts that are here today that do such great work. And I think it's just a natural desire for members of council to want to make all businesses kind of fit in some way into the wonderful work that's being done by the organizations that presented today. Sure, go right ahead.
Well, and we're very lucky that we have 3 great organizations serving our businesses. I hope I'm not jumping the gun a little bit too much. So part of the FY26 budget is going to propose a restructure of the HCD department to create an economic development specialist position. And a large portion of that work is trying to provide those economic development services to businesses that are outside of the geographic boundaries of our current business associations.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilmember Landman?
This is a question for Flower Avenue and Tacoma Langley, which is in preparation for the arrival of the Purple Line. Have you been thinking ahead to sort of marketing efforts, either together with one another for the stops that are close to you and or along the entire coalition, from one end to the other, the construction coalition, the Purple Line, whether collaborative marketing is in your future? I know it's hard to see past the current construction phase, but I was very impressed by hearing about some of the marketing plans underway, so I'm curious if that's on the plan.
We haven't thought that far ahead. We're just so kind of immersed in the here and now. I will say there have been conversations in the PLCC, the Purple Line Corridor Coalition, they've been involved in this in the past, is we felt like perhaps the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation should have a role when it comes to marketing of the entire corridor. So I think it probably would be timely to kind of re-engage them in those conversations. I think they should be part of it, as well as, individual business associations too. We'd be happy to do our part, but I think if we want to market the entire corridor, I think there needs to be some larger player probably at the table too.
Councilmember DeBala? Oh, no, go right ahead.
I'm going to add quickly to that. I think there's a bill in the state legislature that is to offer free ridership and marketing for businesses, which is, a little crumb, but we appreciate it.
We did. We just so that everyone knows, the city did submit testimony in support of Delegate Tarkoudian's bill for that purpose.
I just wanted to say, thank you for showing up and giving us all this information and for showing so we could meet you. And yes, I wish I could bottle all 3 of you and put you at the corner of New Hampshire and East-West Highway, where there's several businesses that could use your help. So I'll be interested when we get to the budget discussion to hear about the regrouping of HCD and the economic specialist. Thank you.
And I think one final question that I have is about and Laura, you gave us a good list of marching orders for things to consider for the council. But for the other organizations, what are some things that would be really helpful for this council, knowing the money's tight for everybody? But what are some things that we may be able to do to continue to support you all? I know, Javier, we've been in lockstep around Purple Line construction issues, but if there are other issues that is important for this council to know, and ways in which we may be able to work in partnership with all 3 of you to make your jobs a little bit easier, definitely feel free. I don't want to put folks on the spot now, but definitely give us a note to let us know how we may be able to better help you.
You're right. I mean, money is always nice, but I really do value just the kind of the technical assistance that people can provide. So we have a great working relationship with Housing and Community Development. I mean, we work very closely with them on kind of the redesign of the Flower Avenue bike lanes and all that, and as well as with Councilmember Honzak. So I think as much as we kind of can speak with one voice, I think that goes a long way. So again, Councilmember Honzak and I have been in communication with some small nitty-gritty issues when it comes to the redesign, making sure that we're getting everything right with that. So I think just kind of continuing to stay in touch on those issues. And sometimes we need the city's help when it comes to coordination of events, shutting down streets. Like, but we have our Long Branch 5K that we do every year. Couldn't do that without the city. And we're always thinking of new events possibly that are maybe more ambitious, might require additional closures, extended closures of streets. So you entertaining that would be helpful as well in the future. So those are the ways I think the city can be helpful to us.
Great, thank you.
Now that you mention it, yeah, I think, I mean, I think that we need to do some real work to bring landlords and property owners to conversations about development. And like, even though they're dues-paying members of my organization, I can't tell you that I have a way to really reach them efficiently and effectively. And I think they need to be part of all these conversations, like they're setting the rents and rents go up every year. There's very little, I'm not talking about all of them, right? But I think there has to be, and there's policies, right, that are in place in other municipalities that create incentives perhaps for business owners who offer long-term leases or like clear language in leases, right? And really taking them to task in like, what I'm going to call a strategy of neglect with some of the properties, like it's clear that it's there. And I mean, I think they can, obviously they can benefit from the purple line, but I can't say that our businesses will survive the purple line. I think that's a real fear. I think people are getting ready to go. So I think so I think unless we get them to like really to the table and really talk to them about what they care about, if they care about small businesses, there's like legacy business programs, I think, that have been in place, and we've discussed that with the PLCC, as examples of how to support or create some sort of coordination between municipalities and landlords, and some sort of community benefit agreement or tax incentives for property owners who again want to work with us. So yeah, that would be amazing.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Hanzak?
Javier, sorry. I was just wondering, in line with what you're just talking about, what you said that you communicate and you're looking at email readership, and I'm very curious about this also for some of our outreach in these international corridors that we have in the city. What are you finding are some of the most effective ways to reach your business owners? Is it email? Have you had any success with physically getting people together? I found that particularly difficult in our part of the city because the business owners are often physically on site all the time, so they can't really leave easily. So I'm just kind of curious if you found a few different ways that you might be able to share with us about how we might brainstorm reaching directly some of those business owners, and or I could, I can't see if Chris is still back there, but that Long Branch might also benefit from.
I mean, I think in my experience, and I'm sure Chris and his experience, you have to show up at their door, right? And just persist and like be persistent, and eventually, they will open up. But it's just being consistent, being there for them, showing you care. I think and that's in person. I think a lot of our folks are using WhatsApp, so we're exploring ways to like use WhatsApp as a platform to connect with communities, right? Because that's the tool that's their social media, the way people are communicating. So, there are ways of using that platform to reach. I know a lot of our communities are also still using Facebook. It's a strong tool for connection. So yeah, I think those are effective ways.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. Well, we are at time for this conversation, but thank you all so much for coming out tonight and sharing all of the wonderful work that you're doing in our community. Wonderful. Okay, so if folks will bear with me, I would like for us to get through the voting session, and then if we need to take a break, we can do a break then. Just as a quick time check for folks, it's 9:33. All right. So next, we're going to move to our voting session. We have the consent agenda, which is the resolutions providing for appointments to committees. Would someone like to move the consent agenda?
So moved.
Councilmember Hanzak moved. Councilmember Dabala seconded. Are there any points of City Clerk?
I just wanted to make clear that there are two resolutions in this consent agenda. One is for an appointment to the Board of Elections, and the other is for 4 appointments to the Recreation Committee. There'll be others that come to you next week.
Great. Thank you very much. Councilmember Lamb.
Point of information to the working group on committees. What is the process, or is there a process that's been established for notifying people who applied and are being passed over so that they are being made aware of their status and that this doesn't come as a complete surprise? Thank you.
I notify them. We do notify people who are not being appointed before tonight. There's only one person that wasn't appointed in this group.
So it's being handled in each cluster as the different appointment votes are being taken, as opposed to other committees we haven't gotten to yet?
Jen, I think I can help with that.
Okay, go ahead.
It's a little bit confusing because of the way we decided to do it this time. We're doing sort of 2 rounds. There was Jesse Carpenter said, there was just one applicant in this batch that wasn't considered for these particular committees. And we will be coming back around and having conversations with some of the applicants to see if they are interested in considering other committees. So that's what's happening right now. Yes. So if anyone's listening, and so we are looking at that very, very carefully. We still had, I think, was it six vacancies on other committees to which no one had applied. So we were still looking at those. And we will be reaching out this week.
Great. Any other questions or points of discussion? Okay. So the all those in favor of the consent agenda, which includes, sorry, I want to make sure that I'm specific. Resolutions providing for appointments to boards and committees, specifically Board of Elections and Recreation and Community Engagement Committee. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Do we have any opposed? Any abstain? Okay. So the consent agenda passes. Okay. And now we're going to move into our work session. Would folks like to have a 10-minute break before we reconvene? Okay, we're going to have a 10-minute break. We will reconvene at 9:50.
Good evening. We are reconvening post-break tonight's meeting of the Tacoma Park City Council. And we will be discussing our next item, which is a work session authorizing the use of a state revitalization program, National Capital Strategic Economic Development Grant Award to preserve affordable housing at 7520. Councilmember Gilbert.
In the interest of transparency, Mayor, I'm gonna recuse myself from the discussion and the vote for this topic. I am a resident at 7520 Maple Avenue, and I am on the board, so I'm gonna step away for this discussion.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Gilbert. With that, I will turn things over to Mr. McNally.
All right, thank you, Mayor, members of council. So I'm very delighted to stand before you today to talk about this project. The city has been involved for a little over a year now, working with the residents at 7520 Maple. I want to briefly start with talking about the city's tenant opportunity to purchase law, which has been on the books for decades now. What it does is it tries to put the kind of control of the building's future in the hands of tenants directly. And in particular, being able to have a voice in the future of a building when it's up for sale. So these rights trigger when a contract for sale is signed between the current owner of a building and a potential future owner, the buyer. And it requires notification to the tenants in writing about the potential sale, what the sale terms are, and also their rights under city law. And it gives the tenants broadly 4 general options for that building. The first is they have the right to purchase the building as an association. We've seen that happen in the case of 112 Lee Avenue. They can assign their rights to another party for purchase, in which is called an assignment of rights. They can negotiate to waive their rights in return for certain concessions from that buyer, which we saw with the purchase of Hampshire Towers. And then they can waive their purchase rights entirely. For a large building, the tenants have to work through a tenant association. So as part of 7520 Maple Avenue, the tenants got together in February of last year and formed a tenant association to exercise their rights. And that begins to put them on the clock. So from the point where they are notified, there is a process that begins and has certain statutory kind of timelines associated with them. And that process can take anywhere from 9 to 15 months. There are some kind of allowances for extensions depending on the financing. So to talk about 7520 Maple, this process began back in February of last year, and we worked with the tenant association. We had previously applied for a state grant to provide funding both in the purchase of the building, but also some operating funds as well. And so we were able to connect them with some operating technical assistance through an organizing group known as CASA, who worked with them. And then we also were able to help connect them with a lawyer who specializes in these sorts of real estate transactions as well. And through that, they were able to identify a developer who was willing to take the project on. And they did sign an agreement with them back in August of last year. We, to keep the process going, utilized our state funding back in June of 2024 to put down the good faith deposit. So that was $55,000. And that was needed to keep the clock moving. Unfortunately, the developer that they had selected was unable to complete the transaction and had to drop out. And the tenant association, to their credit, is a really motivated, very passionate group of individuals. And they got to work and were able to find a new partner in Orlo Management. Orlo Management operates another building in the city of Tacoma Park, Hampshire Towers, and they were actually involved in the previous large-scale tenant opportunity to purchase deal. So we know them and have worked with them in the past. They have reached a development agreement with the tenants. Some of these terms that they've agreed to are maintaining affordable rent levels. So for the first couple of years of operation, they're going to limit rent increases below 3%. And then they made a commitment that future rent increases would be consistent with our rent stabilization ordinance, which is applies to that building. They plan on keeping all their current staff that service the building. They are committing to having ongoing communications and meetings with the tenants. They're still working out kind of how often those meetings will be, but that is one of the terms. They're committed to pursuing solutions with tenants who are behind on their rent, and then also providing resident services to the tenant association. They're looking at an annual budget of about $30,000. That in particular is helpful because that helps residents put on events, services for those residents. It's something that does not always happen. And then kind of most importantly, I would say, having lived in an older building myself, they're planning on doing renovations. So this includes a new roof, looking at solar on the roof as well, adding and renovating amenity rooms, modernizing their access control, and then also looking at the major building systems as well and doing repairs there. This is a big part of kind of what our housing strategy is, which is, our 3 Ps of our 2019 Housing and Economic Development Strategic Plan include produce, preserve, and protect. And I would say it falls under these final 2 Ps of preserving and protecting affordable housing. What this law allows the tenants to do is select an owner who's both responsive to their needs and is also making concrete promises, and that provide a benefit to the tenant. What we're doing with this is utilizing our state funding to provide an additional $350,000 in addition to the $55,000 we've already put in as the good faith deposit, as a forgivable loan that will burn off over 25 years. This will allow Orlo to go and tap additional money from the county and then from private lending as well. But importantly, it will also give us a seat at the table to ensure that the development agreement is followed. One of the tricky pieces with these development agreements, quite frankly, is that even though it's signed, the mechanism for enforcing an agreement is going back to court, usually. And this allows us to provide a voice to the tenants and have a real enforcement mechanism that can be triggered by the city. So that is another positive benefit. Obviously, we don't want to do that. We want the money to stay in the deal and for the loan to burn off, but it is something that we can do. It'll also help Orlo get across the finish line. As Hussein said in his public comments, the developer did pull out a little bit at the last minute. And so the clock is ticking. We have until March 6th to get this across the finish line. What I will say is both Orlo and the county are doing everything that they can to do the due diligence and underwrite this deal. And so not having to worry about an extra $400,000 really provides a little bit of wiggle room for them. So with all that being said, I'm happy to take any questions.
Great. Well, I just want to say thank you. When we were going through the MMPA process, and there were tons of questions about what protections do we have in case buildings sell or in case, people pull out. And one of the things that we kept stressing is that's why we have our tenants first right. That's why it's so important that we're securing these grant funds. That's why it's so important for us to be organizing and mobilizing our tenants associations so that when these things happen, we can move a lot quicker. in terms of addressing our residents' needs. So I just want to thank you, Devin, and the staff and HCD and our city manager's office for continuing to work on this, because if you all did not have all of the foresight to do the work ahead of time, we wouldn't be in the position that we're in right now to even contemplate being able to provide the resources that we're able to provide. So I do just want to thank you and the staff that have been working a lot, along with the tenants associations, has been really putting in a lot of work to make sure that this happens. Councilmember Slagle?
Thank you. Yes, Deputy Director McNally, I would just echo what Mayor Searcy said about how great it is to see this opportunity and the city law working as it should. I just had a couple of quick questions. One is, 25 years is a long time, and so a lot of things can change in terms of the dynamics of a tenant community. And where will this agreement actually remain in the public record? Like, where will it be published and findable by people who maybe move into the building later and aren't aware of it, or future staff, or future council members?
Yeah, so as part of kind of any sale, we have a promissory note, but then we also have what's called a deed of trust. And that gets recorded directly into the Maryland Land Records. And so that is recorded through the clerk's office for the county and sits as a public record. And so that would point to the promissory note. The city obviously keeps on record all of our notes and loans that we have due and payable. So when I first came into this job, one of the first loans that I was made aware of was a loan from 1996. So these sit as well.
Great. So it's recorded as a city loan with the city having an interest in there. Okay.
Yep.
And my other quick question was, with regard to the improvements to the building, I guess this is the year that the clock starts ticking on building energy guidelines for Montgomery County, and I guess by 2035, a lot of changes need to be made. So how does Orlo's agreement align with knowing that 10 years or so out, all these buildings are going to have to conform with building energy guidelines or else face big penalties?
Yeah, so I can't speak definitively to what exactly their plans are in terms of what exact systems they're going to be upgrading to. They are well aware of BEPS. They operate buildings in Montgomery County, and they have been moving towards that. So, for example, with Hampshire Towers, they're currently in the midst of a substantial renovation that puts solar on the roof, has upgraded the HVAC systems in all of the units. And so they're well aware of those requirements and what systems they need to be putting into those buildings to make sure that they're compliant.
Thanks. And you politely corrected me. It's not building energy guidelines, it's BEPS, which, just for people listening, what does that stand for?
Yeah, sorry. Building Energy Performance Standards.
Performance standards. Thank you. Yes.
Councilmember Hanzak?
I just have one question about what type of agreement is this? What is the sort of terminology for this particular type of agreement? And if you could just maybe explain that in simple terms for me to contrast that with a typical building manager and owner structure with a tenant association inside of it. I presume this is a different kind of arrangement with this board.
Correct. So it's called a couple of different things. We use the term development agreement, which isn't quite correct. It might be more correct to call it an assignment of rights, where the tenant association in a legal document is saying we are assigning our rights that we have under city law to this developer in exchange for certain conditions. So it's a legal document that sets forth what the kind of terms of that assignment are. This is different than a typical kind of tenant association landlord relationship, which is usually not defined in such clear terms or sets forth such kind of conditions. Typically it's assigned at the tenant landlord level per unit through a lease agreement.
So is it fair to say then that legal document, in addition to giving clarity, is providing the tenants with a stronger collective bargaining tool as they navigate the next several decades that you might not have under a typical landlord management company arrangement?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak. Councilmember Landman.
I'm trying to understand. I love this idea, but I want to understand it more so that I'll know better next time. So first off, it kind of sounds like a contract with a quid pro quo. The valued object that the tenants are getting is the landlord getting a right to purchase in exchange for which they're getting something of value. So potentially, can they enforce it with like reduced rents or whatever if it's not delivered upon by the new landlord down the road, or is that something that has to be done by the city through this promissory note, which is a thing of value too, but it must be a relatively modest percentage of the total cost of the building, I'm guessing.
Yes. So I'll start with the kind of cost of the project. The total cost of the project is $12.5 million. That's a purchase price of $11 million that they have to meet. And then an additional $1.5 million to kind of seed all these renovations, everything else. In terms of kind of the agreement, it is very much in that way. The enforcement mechanism for tenants, generally speaking, is the same as you would have for any other contract. So you would go into court, you would say this agreement was violated. We are looking for X damages, or for the court to order performance of the contract. And that's a legal kind of procedure. The city wouldn't take part in that if the tenant organization did that. Our kind of piece and the way that we're trying to set up the deal on our end is that we tie the performance under that contract to our loan to the management company. And so one of the terms of default, so to speak, would be non-performance of that development agreement.
May I ask one additional follow-up question? So an active tenant association is a great thing to have in a moment like this. There's 101 units in the building. What is the relationship between each tenant and the tenant association? Must everybody be a member of the association, or did every tenant have to sign an agreement to allow the tenant association to represent them in this, or what is, you move into a building and either you are or you aren't joining it, or is it automatically that you're a member? How does that work?
Yeah, so the way tenant associations work in the city is that you need to register with the city and be eligible to go have these rights. You need to acquire signature of at least a third of the occupied units. So for a building of 100 units, you need at least 34 people who've signed up who agree to be members of the tenant association. We've never required someone join a tenant association. We want tenant associations to be pieces of community that bring people together, not some burden for tenants. In terms of kind of how it works is the tenant associations have a lot of leeway to run themselves and govern themselves. So they elect their officers or their president, depending on the structure of a tenant organization. And that tenant organization has to re-renew their registration every 3 years. And so as part of that, they have to hold new elections or hold a new kind of vote.
Thank you. One question I have, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I recall this happened with Hampshire Towers, where there was one company that had originally entered into the agreement, and then Orlo came on afterwards, and they were still required to honor the terms and conditions that were agreed to with the original purchaser, right? So there were some tenants that had lifelong leases. There were just a lot of things that were as part of that deal that ultimately conveyed and Orlo had to continue to honor. Is that, if, let's say hypothetically, someone else were to come along, a year later, and the terms and conditions that the tenants have negotiated with Orlo have not been, maybe all of the construction and all of the things that were originally planned have not been complete, would that still, or those tenant demands still transfer over, because you would still start like another tenant's first right kind of situation with a new owner?
It's a good question. So I'll start, if I may, I might answer something slightly different, and then I'll pivot to that. So one of the reasons why we really want to support this is the current contract buyer has not signed any agreement and has not agreed to any concessions with the tenants. And so if the purchaser, Orlo, is unable to complete this deal as of March 6th, the rights would default back to them, and they would be free to purchase the building without any sort of agreement with the tenant association. If, for example, a purchaser were to say, and I'm going to use a hypothetical here, were to purchase a building, they had a development agreement with the tenants, and then they were to sell the building, they wouldn't necessarily, the new purchaser may not inherit those agreement conditions. However, it would once again trigger a tenant's rights to purchase, assign their rights. So they would once again be able to kind of have some sort of negotiating power.
Thank you for that. And because in full transparency, I'm familiar with Orlo and what transpired at Hampshire Towers, and how they have been working their way through it, and the fact they kind of bought a big bundle of problems, I should say, and they have been working tirelessly to not only uphold the arrangements that were made previously, but to make modifications to the building. And Hampshire Towers is actually, because I think there was a question before about electrification. Hampshire Towers has become the first privately owned resilience hub in the county because of all of the work that Orlo has been doing in terms of electrifying that building. And there's still more work to be done.
And what I'll say, is Orlo is a good partner. We've had good conversations with them in the past in regards to Hampshire Tower. With purchasing these buildings, you do your due diligence. There's always issues, especially with buildings of a certain age. There's elevator issues, there's boiler issues, there's, you name it. It always is a challenge. And so it's the beginning of definitely a relationship between the tenant association and the new management company. And certainly this is not the end, and the city will be engaged kind of throughout that process. And we're still engaged with the tenant association at Hampshire Towers.
Great. All right. And so not seeing any additional questions, this will come back before council next week for a vote. All right. Thank you very much. All right, so we're going to move to our last item for the evening. It is the revenue sources, commercial, railroad, and public utility taxes, and vacant property tax or fees. Oh, let's go get Councilmember Gilbert. Let him know it's okay to come back.
And Mayor, once we get the presentation, we'll begin the conversation with Deputy City Manager Andrew Boulder.
Okay, wonderful.
Right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Good to see you all.
Andrew, we cannot hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me now? me try and log back in.
Andrew, 1 second, BN is headed back to the control board. You should be good now.
All right. I already did. Not sure. Making progress.
Andrew, you should be good on our end.
Hey, can folks hear me now?
There
We
go.
can hear you now.
Okay, great. Great. So, yeah, good evening, Mayor and Council. Good to see you all. As Deputy City Manager Eubanks may have already said, this is a follow-up from Council's budget resolution, July 31, 2024. These are kind of three of I think there were 6 total bullets for staff research and further information to be provided. Those other 3 bullets we'll be talking about more during the budget process, but we wanted to come before you first to talk about these larger revenue generation items. And Deputy Manager Eubanks and I kind of split this. I'm taking the railroad and utility taxes, and he worked on vacant property and commercial property. And I also want to say a very big shout out. Director Chung is not here tonight, but she was very instrumental in providing a ton of the background research for this, as well as Acting Director McNally. So big thanks to that. So just a quick outline. These are the 3 topics we'll be discussing. David, next slide. For railroad and utility taxes, here's kind of the Maryland State Authority that allows states, counties, and municipalities to levy these taxes. The reason why is they say public utilities are monopolies in the areas that they serve. And so Maryland Tax Property Code, Section 6, 103, allows this, and then Property Code Section 8, 109 talks about the process. Annual assessments are conducted by the State Public Utility Valuation Unit. They do it annually, and they use a unit method of valuation. We talked with the assessor's office last week or the week before, and I'm not sure if unit method came up. It's a little bit unique. It's not like an income-based approach that you might see for commercial properties or looking at comparables. And the reason is you just don't see utility boxes changing hands all the time. So there's not comparables that you can really look at. So the unit method is really talking about the cost of the materials for the structure. It's kind of akin to a replacement value. And this is all property used to operate the business. It's not just real property. It's also personal property as well. Those assessments are certified to the government annually. And then we convert that into local tax bills based on the rates that we set. Director Chung was able to pull this kind of historic tax rate resolution from a few years ago and from FY12. And I thought it was just interesting to note that where we are in the railroad and public utility tax rates is was exactly aligned with our commercial personal property rate, which makes a lot of sense when you think about it, because functionally that's what is being taxed here is personal property of the utilities. And here's some historic assessed values and the revenues associated with it, as it should be. It's and it's appropriate for railroad. It's direct parallel tracks. And we had a little bit. It's been more or less pretty stable. Had a little bit of a dip in the pandemic. That's risen back to where it was sort of pre-pandemic level last year. And in this fiscal year, we just got these numbers. We actually saw a little bit of a dip. I thought this would be helpful in your packets. I kind of gave you the full list of each municipality, but these are just a few selected ones. On the left, I have the state of Maryland and Montgomery and counties. And on the right, just a few selected jurisdictions. A lot of the comparable jurisdictions that we talk about, College Park, Greenbelt, Hyattsville, Rockville. Kind of surprising to see that they don't charge a utility rate at all, as well as Montgomery County and Prince George's County. But in terms of municipalities that do charge, Tacoma Park seems to be somewhere in the middle. And as you can see on the left, a little bit below where some of the Maryland counties are. And interesting to note, Centerville, right, is the big outlier. They charge the most. So this also surprised me in going through in researching this. The total number of utilities that the city charges this tax or levies a tax on is only 9. And of those, as you can see, the vast majority is Pepco and Washington Gas. And David, if you go to the next slide, I just highlight that really when we talk about, who are we taxing here? We're really talking about Pepco and Washington Gas. So what would changes or variations, how would that impact ratepayers throughout Tacoma Park? I was able to get in touch with someone from Pepco's staff just to pose the question, say we were having this conversation with council. And they say it's they directly pass through whatever is levied onto ratepayers. And I was able to look at a B&D bill that I had when I lived there. And it does say there's a franchise tax sort of line on the bottom. It's also interesting to note that they don't base it on municipality. It's just one, lump franchise tax that they pass down to the ratepayers, it seems, of all of Maryland. So for every 10 cent, every $1 million increase in tax levy, and that's the total amount levied, which Tacoma Park would never touch. The total amount we levy now, it's only about $250,000, would result in a 10-cent residential bill impact. I'm assuming that's an average residential bill. So based on that total assessed value of, in the 14 million range, every 1 cent in the Tacoma Park rate would increase revenues by about $1,500 or 10 cents by about $15,000. We're not talking huge dollars and cents here, but important to know. And one of the things within the proposed budget, as we finalized the budget, we didn't have the total assessed value yet for FY25. So with an 11-cent increase, we'd actually probably more or less just stabilize with where we projected from last year. So just something to keep in mind, and we may suggest or recommend some changes in the reconciliation process to manage that adjustment.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy City Manager Bolduc. We will now pivot to discuss first vacant property tax and then commercial property tax. I'll begin the discussion with just a short description of the current process and some background information. The City of Tacoma Park requires the registration of all vacant residential, commercial, multifamily, industrial, and institutional properties and structures located within the city to discourage their abandonment and neglect. There is an annual fee of about $200 due at the beginning of the fiscal year, and that annual fee is assessed every year that the property is vacant. Failure to register vacant property results in a citation. And the city defines vacant property as a building, structure, or portion of a structure that is not used or occupied for over 30 days. I'll also note that there is a 6-month grace period between when that building becomes vacant and when it needs to be added to the registry. There are currently 8 registered vacant properties in the city. This does include the former Washington Adventist Hospital site. The Washington Adventist Hospital site consists of 2 parcels. Together, those 2 parcels total $18.8 million, and they produce a tax revenue to the city of $103,855. The total assessed value of the 7 remaining properties is approximately $3.6 million. The estimated current tax revenue for those 7 properties is $20,357. Over the last 5 years, the number of vacant properties in the city has ranged from 5 in 2021 to 10 in 2022, and 6 of the existing 8 properties have been vacant for more than 3 years. The authority for both the vacant property tax and the commercial property tax are identified in section 7.16.020 annual tax levy on real and personal property. This authorizes the city council to tax 4 classes of real property, which include apartments, commercial, residential, and vacant property. Currently, the city applies a uniform property tax of 0.5522 per $100 of assessed valuation to each class. To analyze the impact of the vacant property tax on the city's revenue, city staff adopted the City of Frederick model. The City of Frederick's vacant property tax assumes a tiered approach under which properties that remain vacant for more than 3 years are subject to increased tax rates. Staff believe that this model provides adequate time for owners to address challenging property issues while disincentivizing long-term vacancy. The rate begins at 2 times the normal rate and is increased by 0.5 each year until year 10. In year 10, the rate reaches its maximum of 5 times the normal rate. For simplicity, the staff analysis holds the total number of vacant properties and assessed value constant. The analysis also assumes that each vacant property remains vacant for at least 3 years. And to discuss the impact, we'll separate the impact of the 7 vacant properties from the 8th property, which is the Washington and Venice site. So for the 7 vacant properties, the impact of the property tax rate is illustrated in the graph below at the bottom of the slide. In year 4, you'll see that the city would realize an additional $20K. And in year 5, with the city's assumptions, it would be possible to earn an additional $80K. Now, it's important to note here that these numbers probably do not reflect exactly what would happen in practice. They don't account for increases in assessed value or changes in the base property tax. It's also unlikely that most properties will become subject to the tax will remain vacant over the lifetime of a policy such as this. The impact of the property tax on the Washington and Venice Hospital site is also illustrated in the graph at the bottom. As noted in the graph, in year 4, the property would yield an additional $104K, and in year 10, the property would yield an additional $415K. Once again, these numbers do not account for any increases in assessed value over time or changes in the base property tax over time. Also, for properties such as Washington and Venice, where there's likely to be significant interest for redevelopment, the city should very much consider the impact that a property tax might have on the redevelopment potential of the site. And what I mean by that is at some point, such a property could be in some phase of development that is not technically construction. And so by taxing a property that is actively going through some process, it might act as a disincentive. All right, we'll move on to commercial property tax. And again, I'll begin with a little bit of background. Just a couple of facts that are going to be key points for our discussion. The city's commercial property tax property tax base consists of 182 properties. The total assessed value of those 182 properties is $275 million. Commercial properties generate $1.5 million in tax revenue and represent 9% of total property tax revenue. A 1 cent change in commercial property tax would yield an additional $27,500. And lastly, for some context later in the analysis, in FY20, the city eliminated the inventory tax on commercial properties, which resulted in a revenue reduction of approximately $320K. At the time or thereabout, there was also some conversation about potentially making up that lost revenue with an increase in commercial property taxes. Again, the authority is provided in this section for altering the commercial property tax. A part of the city staff analysis was a survey of 9 surrounding jurisdictions to evaluate and compare the city's tax rate and annual lease costs per square foot. A call back to what Deputy City Manager Baldick mentioned. I do want to thank HCD and Acting Director McNally for his assistance in gathering this information. What we learned through the assessment is that the current commercial rate of 0.522 is slightly above the regional average of 0.5381. And the same is true for the leasing costs. The city's leasing costs are about $36 per square foot, which is slightly above the regional average of $33 per square foot. And here is that information in a chart. You can see Tacoma Park is about midway through. And this slide should say commercial property tax impact rather than regional survey. The impact on the city's, based on the city staff analysis, to offset the $320K of lost inventory tax revenue from FY20, and those FY20, that FY20 number is based on the FY20 dollars, not a inflationary factor applied. The commercial property tax would need to increase by 21.73% or 12 cents to 67.22 per $100 of assessed value. A 12-cent increase in the tax rate will result in an average tax bill increase of $1,813 per commercial property parcel, with the most significant impact on high-value properties, of course. The three that are most heavily impacted by such a change would be the Megamart property, the Washington Adventist Hospital site, and then Tacoma Langley Crossroads. $38,000 increase, $22,000 increase, and $19,000 increase, respectively. If you assume that the percentage increase of 21% or 22% is passed on to tenants, you can assume that the commercial lease rates would increase from $36 per square foot to about $43.82 per square foot. And overall, an increase of 12 cents may impact business competitiveness and potentially lead to the relocation of some area businesses. And this concludes our presentation. City staff are available to take any questions from council.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Councilmember Lamond?
Right now, Montgomery County does not charge any railroad tax. I think you noted in the summary, if I'm right. And it's at zero. Some counties seem to do it for railroads and utilities, but Montgomery County doesn't. I'm just curious whether, given their fiscal problems at a county level, whether there's any possibility that they're going to wind up in putting a tax in place that would impact how big of a tax increase we might want to consider.
Andrew, do you have any insight?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, whether Montgomery County or, again, Prince George's County is surprising, Rockville is surprising, why there are some that do and others that don't. Anne Arundel County, where I used to live in Annapolis, right? They clearly do at a rate that's very aligned with other counties. One thing I did want to note is because, Tacoma Park, relatively speaking, it's $17 million of assessed value. If Montgomery County, instituted a tax like this, it would be in those sort of millions of dollars worth of revenue, which would have an impact, right, on ratepayers, or a much higher, more significant impact on ratepayers. So, it's one of those. Yeah, it's a good question, a good question to ask county staff, which we're certainly happy to follow up and see if we can understand.
Councilmember DeBala?
Just to that point, I don't know the details, but I remember the county adopted some kind of utility tax a few years ago to fund their climate programs, but I don't remember the details. And so it may be that they have that instead, or maybe they used to have a straight utility tax. What I vaguely remember is they had a utility tax and then they changed it and targeted it. But I didn't have time to look up the details beforehand.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember DeBella. Councilmember Honda.
I have two questions. Thank you very much. This was really, really helpful. The first is related to the railroad and utility tax. If I understand correctly, the main negative impact to the city, if you will, if we were to implement an increased railroad and utility tax, as I understand it, is that there would be a pass through possibly to customers. Is there any other let's call it negative impact to the city that could occur by adding taxes to any of these utilities that I'm not clear on?
It's
Like-
not obvious to me, but
I mean, they have a monopoly, right? So they, right.
yeah, I could not think of one, Councilmember, but Andrew, do you have any further insight?
Yeah, I can't think of any other significant increase. Again, if the county or, other counties or some of the other big municipalities sort of caught on to, this revenue, so I'm sure they're aware of it, but, that's the only thing I can see is, Tacoma Park's raising the rates, maybe, and there's a cumulative effect. But that's really the only thing I can think of. Again, we're talking, a 10-cent increase is about 15,000. And 15,000 spread over all the ratepayers within Pepco's system is pennies.
I guess I was thank you. I was thinking, for example, is there any reason to believe that it could change our relationship with any of these service providers? Anyone have any experience with that?
I didn't get that sense in my conversation with the Pepco government liaison. I think if we were in a position where we were suddenly extremely out of line, with other municipalities that do charge this rate, there could be some eyebrows raised. But again, I think we're sort of in the middle right now, and making a 10-cent raise or I don't think would have a significant impact in our
thank you.
relationship with
And
these
then
utilities.
thank you. My second question is related to the commercial rate. I was just looking at those price per square footage and thinking about the impact in a place like Tacoma Langley Crossroads, where you already have the levy on top of your commercial property tax rate. So Deputy Manager Eubanks, you mentioned that the average in Tacoma was, across the county. I'm sorry, I'm not looking
Across
at my
the
slides.
county, it was about
30 something cents. But
in
if
the
I
city, it was
remember,
36.
and if I remember correctly from the presentation we had today, I think that Javier said that it's about 50 cents per square foot in Langley Crossroads. I don't know whether that includes the levy or not, but I'm just guessing that 30 cents would be quite different, and therefore quite a lot higher if we were to levy it universally across the whole city.
Yeah, I
Does
would
that sound
assume-
right?
I would assume that Mr. Rivas's numbers did not include
The levy?
his levy.
Yeah. So do you have any sense of just how that might impact the different business areas, just based on these three areas we talked about today with these associations? I mean, you're talking about the average across 30 cents, and it's a little higher
Yeah, we don't
than
have
our
any-
surrounding areas. Do we have a sense of just how different that is from one part of the city to?
We don't, and
or
I
is-
don't know if the data that we have access to would get that granular.
Okay.
We were pulling most of this from LoopNet. I'm not sure if you're familiar with LoopNet.
Mm-mm.
It probably gives us census level data. I don't
Okay.
know if it gives us neighborhood level data.
Okay. Well, I guess just for my colleagues, I think it's notable though that this might have a much more significant impact in the Tacoma Langley Crossroads area is it's what's on my mind right now. Yeah.
Thank you, Councilmember Honzak. Councilmember Schlegel.
Yeah, just one comment and then a couple of quick questions. The comment is, it's just amazing to me that the replacement value for those two large utilities is said to be $14 million. For all the Pepco things that we have in town and all the Washington Gas, for 15 million. So that's just kind of, I guess, it's because of depreciation, you think? Okay, thank you. My questions were just to follow on what Councilmember Honzak just asked. On the slide 21, Deputy Manager Eubanks. This is the one thing where I'm trying to do the math, where the second to last bullet point says potential increase in commercial lease rates from 36 per square foot to 43.82 per square foot. That obviously is a big jump that we would want to think carefully about. I just was saying, okay, that's about $8 per square foot increase. And then a bullet point farther up says that the average tax bill increase would be $1,813 per commercial parcel. So doing the math, that would sound as if our average commercial parcel is about 227 square feet, which seems surprisingly small for our average square parcel, like 22 by 10 space. So is that math that we should be, that could possibly we could double check, just because that seems to be a big consideration that we'll have to make, is the impact on lease rates?
We can double check the numbers. 1 is referring to, just let me think out loud here for a second. 1 is referring to lease rates. The other is referring to a tax bill. So you're saying that
I'm saying that if a business was hit with an $1,800 additional tax bill,
right,
and then they're trying to recoup that through lease rates, they would only need to recoup $8 over a whole year per square foot if they were as small as 227 square feet. You know,
the tax rate is based on the assessed value, right? And then the question about the lease is not based on assessed value, it's just square footage. And so what we did was we took the same percentage increase in the property tax rate and applied it to the commercial lease. So I'm not sure I'm following exactly the correlation that you're pointing out, but we can definitely look at the numbers and make sure everything pans out.
That's assuming a pure.
It's assuming a pure pass-through,
okay.
right?
Yeah. So now I see. So that essentially this assumption is that if the tax bill went up by 21.73%, then the lease rate goes up 21.73%.
Right.
And that would surprise me, because it would make me think that the only reason they're charging rent is just to pay taxes, as opposed to paying off any loans or upkeep or anything like that.
Right. The assumption here is that everything else remains constant. And so if it also assumes that increase happens immediately, that's not likely, right? Most people probably have a longer term lease. So we had to simplify the assumptions to some degree in order to try to draw some kind of conclusion. So we can definitely make it more complicated. But for now, it assumes just kind of a 1-to-1 pass through.
It's a true additional cost to that business, that property. So any tenant is most likely going to receive the lion's share of that additional cost, regardless of what, in this case, it would be additional tax burden.
Sure. Yeah. I would just think, yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. I'll hold up there. I think, yeah, it is kind of important. It's just asking if we need to, if it's possible to calculate that with an assumption that taxes are constitute a portion of what's charged to the leasees, as opposed to being all of what's charged.
Right. Just that portion would grow.
Right. What we know is that the owner of the parcel would not pay for the taxes themselves. They would pass that on to lessee. And so I think it's right to assume that portion of their lease payment would increase by the same amount
Yeah.
that the tax rate increased.
So let's say it would go up 150 a month, 1,800 divided by 12 months.
I'll
So
take your word on the math.
So I would think if it went up 150 a month, that wouldn't correspond to $8 more per square foot every month. That would be a really small place.
I'm not sure I can do the math as quickly
Okay.
as you can
All right.
right now, but we
Okay.
could definitely follow up offline.
All right. Yeah, I'll send a follow-up question. I'm sorry to take so much time.
Sure. And I just want to make sure that when we're talking about commercial property tax, that perhaps we're not just thinking about storefronts, but I know like in the Crossroads, you have a lot of smaller businesses that are really in tight kind of office space kind of rentals. And so the only caveat I would give is that we're assuming that these are all the retails, and it could potentially be the case that you're talking about a building that maybe has a bunch of different offices within them that are of a smaller footprint. They're all leasing the space to this particular entity. So just to kind of throw that out there, I know that in the Crossroads, there's a lot of that where there's larger buildings with a lot of smaller office space kind of businesses within. Councilmember Landman?
Looking at the DC handling of commercial property taxes, you had in your chart, helpfully, you had their rate, which was quite a bit higher. It was $1.65. But they also have, and I'm not saying anything about whether that's the right rate or wrong rate, but looking online at the way that they bill, they have different tax rates based on assessed value, bigger and smaller than 10 million, 5 million, and 2.5 million. And so it's clear that they're trying to not burden, and the taxes are lowered based on a lower number percentage based upon the size of the building being smaller, or the property being smaller. So I think the concern that we're all experiencing is wondering what this would do to a really small operations. I'm just curious whether we have the possibility, as we think about this, of having a differential rate depending upon the square footage of the property or some other appropriate marker. What I don't know, and this is kind of part of the question, is if we have a commercial property owner who has like a 10 million square foot property, or however big the big one would be, but they're leasing it out to a whole bunch of small operators, it doesn't do us much good to make that differential. So I'm just curious whether that's something that's entered into your calculation, whether we could have this burden, if we do increase the taxes, fall more appropriately on larger property owners and have a differential tax based on the size of their property.
I would say yes, we could structure it however we want to. I think in terms of what the code currently allows for, it does not give any further deviation in the commercial class. So we may, and this is a question for the city attorney, we may end up having to add some code language to allow for a different rate for a subclass of commercial. And to your point about how it would actually be implemented, I think the short answer is we probably need to think that through some. You're right. The tax rate is currently based on the parcel size, the parcel. And I think what we learned from the representatives from SDAT last week is that it is income based. And so the owner would aggregate the income that they receive from the property. And so we'd have to figure out how to work with, I guess, within that limitation somehow. And it's not clear to me exactly how that would play out.
Okay, Councilmember DeBala.
Thank you. A few things. When we looked into this a few years ago, I think we were told that you can only have one commercial class, not subsets in Maryland, but that would be the legal question. Can you break down commercial further? Similarly, just wanting, as I said in my note, to double check that the state definition of vacant as a classification, and what it says in the city code, just making sure they're consistent. And because I'm still a little concerned about what I got told the last time. But to Councilmember Schlegel's point, I also am a little confused by that number. So for example, if I own a commercial building and 10%, I'm making up a number, of my total expenses is my taxes, then my it's not 100% of my lease rates that's going to go up. It's 100% of that 10%. If that makes any sense. I mean, not 100% of the time. It would be that 10% that I'd be wanting to raise out of, not the whole thing, and that's why I'm a little confused about that number. However, I am really grateful that you point out what I think is the big downside, which is the impact on the rents, particularly for the smaller businesses, because that does seem to me to be the stopping block. Which leads me to two questions. One is, if we were to consider a smaller increase, would that be worth the work to do, not a 12-cent increase, but a smaller increase of some sort in the commercial tax? Because still the same amount of work to do 1 cent increase, a 12-cent increase. And the other question is for this and the utility tax, what would be our, particularly for this, how would we be working with the affected parties to let them know that we're considering this, if we are? Right now we just have information, but to make sure that we discuss this with them. So that's my comments on the commercial. I did have a question on a comment and a question about the utility rates. And so on the utility rates, it seems to me that the bigger utilities do place an extra burden on city services, city staff. And so I think I can justify wanting to see a higher tax rate for them. And what was the question? Give me just a second. I wrote it down. Yeah, but the question of engaging or at least alerting them to the consideration of this, what would be our process for doing that? The utility, well, both, but I'm referring specifically to the utilities. And on vacant property tax, it's not a lot of dollars, but I hear your point about whether there's an impact on a site if it's being readied for redevelopment. I don't see that in the case of a single family home or a duplex. What would that be? I don't see that as an issue, but is that an issue primarily for the hospital site? The impact on sites redevelopment potential?
So I'm not sure. Can you restate your question?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
not sure
So
I'm following.
so thinking about in the vacant property tax, you point out some of the downsides, and one of them is that at some point there's some costs to renovate or redevelop the property, but they're still getting dinged for the vacant property tax that year. And I don't see that as much of an issue for this. It's a good point, but I don't see it as that much of an issue for single family homes that are vacant.
Right. I agree
So
with you.
the big issue is the hospital site. And so then the question is there any, not to make this any more complicated, but is there some way to distinguish within vacant property? And I'm guessing it's the same thing, that there's no subsets of vacant property.
Right. I think what you would do is, I agree with you that there is not quite as big of a challenge for single-family properties. And part of that is that you don't do single-family redevelopment in phases, right? So the concern for larger properties is that you could be in some phase of development, which could, as we all know, could take a couple of years to pursue. However, the intent of a policy such as this is to motivate someone to do something with a vacant parcel or potentially a vacant lot. The same condition would not be true if somebody is actively trying to do something.
So-
And so the part of the reason why we differentiated between the 7 and the 8 is because the 7 is probably more common. I think, to your point, an easier matter to conceptualize in some kind of policy. I do think, I don't have a language for you today, but I do think we can come up with some language that would exempt properties like a Washington and Venice from being negatively impacted by a policy that is intended to affect a different type of property.
So once you file a site plan or you pull a building permit or something like that is what I was wondering about.
It would
Yeah,
have
so
to be
there might be
something
some way to do that.
earlier in the
Earlier in
process.
the
Yeah.
step than
Yeah, and I'm not
building
sure
permit.
exactly what would make
Yeah.
the most sense, but something
Something like that. So, and I like, because I like the increasing fees. If, to the degree we can give an incentive to get a property owner moving, I'm not sure these are higher enough, even if you increase them over time, but it's a good start. So thank you for all of this analysis. This is really interesting.
Thank you,
And then-
Councilmember
thank you.
DeBala. And just as a time check, it's 11 o'clock. Councilmember Hanzak?
Actually, Councilmember DeBala just asked my question. Thank
Okay,
you.
great. Councilmember Wesselek, do you have a question?
You're welcome.
Yeah, I have a question on the slide 21, where it has the bullet points about Mega Mart, Washington Venice Hospital, and Tacoma Langley Crossroads with the quantities. Can you explain that? Because this kind of seems confusing to me. I know that Mega Mart is big, but it's not bigger than the hospital. And then what is included in the Crossroad? Can you just break down what
Sure.
those calculations are?
So those, the increase is based on the assessed value of the property. The assessed value is not a acre calculation. It is a income calculation. And so what this suggests is that Megamart is producing or has higher revenues or higher incomes than Washington and Venice, and Washington and Venice has higher incomes than Tacoma Langley Crossroads. And because of the higher assessed value, when you apply the new tax rate, you would see the respective increases that are noted here.
And I just want to kind of, because the SDAT person kind of also provided a little bit of clarity as it relates to, because I don't want us to get confused with business revenues or incomes of those businesses. There are special cases. So for example, the hospital site, because it is a hospital, would be assessed at a different because of its nonprofit status, it would be assessed at a different rate than, say, a strip mall or a grocery store. So I do think it's important for us to just keep in mind that the uses here are pretty different, which might also impact the assessed value of those properties.
Institutional zoning versus commercial.
Right.
These are, just to be clear, these are all considered commercial by SDAT. And by the city. City has one class of commercial. So truly the difference here is just the assessed value. But to the mayor's point, again, because this is income based, basically based on what the information suggests, is that the hospital, because of its, I guess, organizational structure, the nature of what they do, is producing less income than Megamart. And because the assessed value is income-based, any property that produces, the entire property, produces higher incomes would then have a higher tax bill.
Okay. It was described more or less like a hospital is a community benefit, and therefore a landlord is not going to charge them very high rents, which is what is considered like the incomes. How much rental revenue can you get off of a property? I really need a hospital in my community. I'm going to charge you a very low amount. The question that was posed was about grocery stores, for example. Often grocers don't pay the same level of rents as, say, some other market commercial property. And therefore, when you're looking at their revenues or the amount of income that's generated based off the rents, grocery stores tend to be lower than some other forms of businesses. So what was described from SSTAT was that depending on, this was a side conversation, didn't happen, but depending on the use, there may be a reason why the rents that are charged for a particular property, which is used to ultimately assess the value of the assessed value of the incomes that would be generated from that parcel, the use may dictate that. Because if I'm a landlord and I consider a grocery store as an anchor tenant, I'm not going to charge them as much as, say, Chuck E. Cheese, although I love Chuck E. Cheese, but I'm not going to charge them as much because I really want them to be there. Similar for a hospital. If I have a hospital, I'm not going to charge the hospital as much. I'm going to want them to be there because they're going to bring people to my community. They're going to bring workers. They're going to bring jobs. They're going to bring people that's going to shop at that Mega Mart. So I think the institutional versus like the purpose of the property, which dictates how much rents are paid or the revenues that would be generated from it, from the actual parcel itself, dictates the assessed value. And that was, I'm just highlighting that because that was something that I was actually very surprised about and did not realize that actually comes into play as well.
Yeah. I'm definitely going to have to follow up to wrap my brain around this, especially because Mega Mart is mostly a grocery store based on the examples you're saying, but they have the highest. One quick, the Tacoma Langley Crossroads line item here, is that kind of combining all of the businesses? Like what
Right,
is,
so it's the tax assessment is based on the parcel. And then
what is the Tacoma Langley, like the entire business district?
it is the parcel that includes what we know as the shopping center.
Oh, so you're talking about one of the shopping centers.
Yes, I believe that's all one.
Mega Mart. Chuck E.
Mega Mart is
Cheese.
Right.
separate, but they're all in that same plaza.
So this is the Chuck E. Cheese strip mall.
Yes,
Is
it's not,
what
it's not
Tacoma
the-
Langley
it is not
Crossroads
the
means. Right. Thank
lease
you.
space that is the grocery store. I'm sorry if that was confusing.
Oh yeah, I especially with the presentation earlier, I'm like, what? But that is, I guess, the name of that official.
That's the name, the
where
official
Chuck E.
name of that
Cheese is.
plaza.
Got it. Thank you.
I just want
Councilmember Slagle?
So this might be a question for Deputy Manager Baldock, if you're still on.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah, so on the list of the railroads and utilities, I was surprised that they're all utilities and there's not the railroad. I just pulled up the description of the corporate boundaries, and our boundaries go to the west side of the tracks. So I know it's not a long distance, but shouldn't we have the right to be taxing CSX or whoever owns the rail line there?
Yeah, and Councilmember DeBello raised a similar question earlier today, and I agree with you. If there's something within our boundaries that would qualify under the definition of railroad that would be taxed, that it should be taxed. There may be reasons why not, and I don't know the answers to those, but I do think it's worth a follow-up question to the valuation unit, just to ensure, hey, we noticed that there's this property. Is there any reason why, they might be exempt from this particular tax? And we'd like to understand why.
Thank you.
So I want to thank the staff for putting together this presentation. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that
are really helpful for us to think about, particularly as we are working on the budget. There's a couple of things that came to mind for me during the presentation in terms of, and taking a 50-foot step back, what is the purpose, right? What are we trying to do? It's one thing to just say, hey, we want money, right? It's one thing to say, hey, we just want money and we will get it wherever we can. It's something totally different to say, what is the purpose or goal associated with the taxation? And sometimes when we're talking about the vacant properties is to avoid, like the monies aren't there, but it's really more to make sure that we're getting the necessary turnover of properties in our communities so we don't have blight. When we're talking about the commercial property tax, one of the things that always comes to mind for me is the fact that we are not on an island. We are surrounded by other, most of our business districts actually share a border with another jurisdiction. So we have to ask ourselves, what is the goal? Is the goal to just get money? Or is the goal to make sure that we have thriving commercial districts that people could easily go across the street to Prince George's County and get a lower rate? Or they can go right across the street and be in Silver Spring proper and get a lower rate. If our goal when it comes to our commercial properties is to get to the point where we have thriving commercial districts, then to me, the gain of an extra 20,000 or however many thousand we may get may not be worth the cost of actually not creating this hurdle or continuing to create hurdles for businesses to come into our community, which ultimately would do what we're looking for, which is increase the assessed value. Like if I could charge probably more rents if I develop certain parcels that are currently underutilized and get a higher assessed value versus taxing the bejesus out of the one thing that's there, right? So I do think it's important that as we are having these conversations, that everybody has in the back of their minds, what's the goal? And what is it that we're thriving to do? There was one question I had about the whole vacant property item, and that's for buildings, right? That's not like if someone comes in and bulldozes and it's just it becomes a vacant lot and then they're no longer able to be taxed, right?
It is a bit unclear in the city code. We do need to follow up with the city attorney as to whether or not our definition technically allows for us to also potentially assign a higher vacant tax for a vacant lot. In practice, it is only applied to vacant improved properties. And so the 8 properties that were included in the analysis are all improved properties. I also think it's important for all of us to know, city staff and council together, the part of the reason why the primary focus is on improved property is because the number of vacant lots in the city is likely to be very small, given that we are fairly built out. And for the lots that do exist, we did do a cursory analysis to try to figure out how we might identify lots. And what we found is that the vast majority of the ones that we were able to identify are adjacent parcels to a owner. So they own an improved parcel, and then they, also own the lot adjacent to it. And so I think we would want to avoid taxing a person who is technically using a lot in the way that we would charge somebody if we wanted to incentivize them to build on that lot. The other sites that we saw were way too small to do anything with. And there were maybe 1 or 2 that were actually listed in Tacoma Park as unimproved sites. But generally, the number of unimproved sites is likely to be pretty small.
No, that's helpful. And in terms of the railroad and utility taxes, this is one where I'm a little like, oh, okay. I would like to talk to Kensington because their numbers are pretty high. I'm like, what are you all doing? But
I wanted to reflect on what you were saying about Kensington, because I do think that that's actually quite comparable to us like Tacoma Park, the train goes right through Kensington. And it imposes a significant cost on the community, and so it's logical that we would look to them as an example of another directly impacted community.
Mm-hmm. And so we'll have an opportunity tomorrow. That's if Kensington is at the MML meeting, but I do think that I'm always concerned about increasing, particularly pass-throughs to utility bills, especially because we know that a lot of residents are experiencing increases in their utility bills due to the frigid weather that we're experiencing. But the fact that this is spread out not just amongst our residents, but a lot of people, it seems like it could be a minimal impact to get a little additional revenues. But
Yeah, Mayor, if I may, I appreciate your question about sort of what are we trying to accomplish here, right? What is it, curbing behavior in some way? Is it just trying to get money? Is it to reduce a burden on the residential property rate? There are many kind of policy reasons that hopefully this information provides some of the data to help assess that. But your point on an increase to the this 10 cent or 11 cent increase on the railroad and utility tax rate, the methodology I had thought about was we're receiving about 7% or even higher, less, right, in our cable franchise fees every year. This a little bit of an increase here is a different way. Folks are cutting the cord, but they're quote unquote cutting the cable bill, but they're still receiving their services from a way that we can't capture those cable franchise fees. This is a way to make up for that. Another thought is just the revenue neutral side of this. If the assessed value is decreasing, like it looks like it has from FY24 to FY25, do we want to stay more or less revenue neutral? Because if Washington Gas is reporting depreciation of assets and the state's comfortable with that, with that depreciation, then it's something it's another reason to consider, well, at least let's just try and stay revenue neutral on these sources. So that's why there's sort of something, kind of baked into or an increase kind of reflected in the city manager's proposed budget. But just to get to that point of, why, the big question of why.
no, that's the neutrality point is also a really good one. Thank you for bringing that up, and thank you, Deputy City Manager Eubanks, because I know it was a lot of work to figure out the path to do this, and I appreciate all of the work that you all have done. So with that, we are over time. So I just want to make sure that we have a motion to adjourn, so we don't need sleeping bags. Thank you all very much. Everyone have a fantastic night.